It's actually 12:33, and let the record show, Commissioner Sachs has returned. We can start now. We have your permission. Okay, very good. All right, we will now settle down and move to item 3C2, am I right?
You are correct, Mayor.
Oh, boy, okay. Let's dig in.
We have an hour on the item after that.
Okay.
Okay, and Lisa Amara, the zoning director, will be presenting this item.
Very good.
Okay, I know everyone's going to want to take a seat for my riveting presentation.
That's right. We want rapt attention to this presentation.
Forgive the glasses. They have a tint because I can't find my ones that don't have a tint, but I can't see the screen either. So my name is Lisa Amara, and I'm presenting the Commerce Future Land Use Amendment. And this is a county-initiated text amendment that followed up the workshop with the Board of County Commissioners on the Ag Reserve back in October, November. It was technically initiated on February 2nd. And this came about following multiple text and future land use amendment requests for industrial over the years. There's two components. Now, this is a text amendment, so there's a lot of public speakers today, but this is not connected with any particular piece of property. This is county initiated, which gives us a lot more flexibility and freedom with what we want to do with this amendment. So it's nice to be here for a change without an actual applicant that's on the other mic. So this is all staff. So there's two components. One is to establish a new future land use designation for the urban suburban tier called Commerce. And the second is, if that's supported, to also apply that in the Ag Reserve with some policy guidance. So there's two pieces and two motions and two levels of controversy. So far, I don't know if anyone's opposing having a new future land use designation called Commerce. I think most of the dialogue is going to be
There is no controversy today.
no controversy. Most is going to be about the Ag Reserve. So in the county, there's two future land use designations for industrial, in the plain old industrial, which allows all kinds of uses, light, heavy, that's only allowed in the urban suburban tier and in the agricultural reserve tier. It's also allowed in the limited urban service area up by Pratt Whitney. And there's about 13,000 acres of this in unincorporated county. We have an economic development center land use designation, which was a 1990s style office campus-like research park. Vista Center is the kind of model for that, even though Vista Center is not economic development center. And that's only allowed in the urban suburban tier, and there's about 461 acres total. So here are our main hubs in unincorporated county for industrial development, those four areas right there. This is the North County area. This is a limited urban service area where we have the Palm Beach Park of Commerce and Pratt Whitney. All the gray in this map is industrial. And then out in the Glades communities surrounding Belle Glade, Pahokee, and South Bay, there's some industrial areas as well. Much of the northern pieces are related to sugarcane production, and then we have the inland port, which is the triangle shape idea that was approved several years ago. This is the industrial area near Riviera Beach. This essentially is somewhat like an enclave or a pocket on north and south sides around the North Lake and Blue Heron area. And then we have probably our largest interior chunk of industrial development. This has the Vista Center where a lot of us work right there. This is the planned industrial park concept that was big in the 90s. And then this is really our heart and soul, in my opinion, of Central Palm Beach County, this industrial area right here. This is where lots of businesses and economic development here. And then we also have some industrial area allowed over in this area, which in the former buyout area by PBIA Airport. And then we have some industrial uses in the Ag Reserve. We have projects that came before the board last month here. This has had industrial development since at least the 80s, at least 1989. And then there's that new Sunflower that was approved a little bit ago. And that's the bulk of the industrial land in the county. Now, the idea behind the commerce designation actually came about many years ago in review of intergovernmental coordination with Delray Beach. Delray Beach has a land use designation that allows freestanding industrial, kind of business office-oriented development in suburban areas. Where it's different that we're proposing is maybe this is a good concept where there's some properties located along thoroughfares that might not meet our commercial location criteria for a retail development, but maybe it's appropriate for some light non-residential uses. So this idea is proposed. We've had many amendments over the past few years in the urban suburban tier asking for self-storage or different kinds of office warehouse, and industrial is a bit of an intense land use designation because it allows anything. So the idea is if we allow properties to come in, we can narrow down the uses and come up with location criteria and allow things like landscape services and things to come in the urban suburban tier near residential areas, but have criteria that we've proposed, limiting their locations to arterial roadways. We would establish a floor area ratio similar to industrial. We would not require a new zoning district. I'm not excited about making any new zoning districts and adding to the ULDC. So we would use the IL and the MUPD zoning districts that are already there, but the uses would be defined to only be light industrial style, and no vehicular or auto repair uses as well that might be a conflict with the commercial location criteria or might have an increase in compatibility issues. So that's the first half of this amendment, is creating a commerce flu. And the idea is that if transmitted today, we'll work in the zoning division to come up with some language for the ULDC and present that at adoption. So that's the first half. And these are some of the kind of uses. The comp plan already defines what is light industrial and what is heavy industrial. Most of it is separating hazardous or combustible or noisy or smelly kinds of uses in the heavy column, and the less noxious style of uses in the light column. This is already defined by the plan, but we haven't taken this further into the ULDC to actually separate this out. So that would be the idea before adoption, is that we would separate those two camps out a little bit. The next item, part of this amendment, is the ag reserve. Now, there's no policies in the comp plan about the ag reserve. As Travis presented earlier, the 1999 master plan consultant recommended 350,000 square feet of industrial at Boynton and the Turnpike and Atlantic and Turnpike. However, the Board of County Commissioners in 1999 said, no, absolutely not. Those would be regional. We are not going to have any more industrial in the tier. However, although staff went back in some areas, such as institutional uses west of State Road 7, staff went back in 2001 and put those policies in the plan. There was no ban of industrial placed in the plan other than that direction that's in the master plan by the board. So in the absence of any policies, any parcel in the ag reserve could come in, like the parcel we had earlier today, and ask for an industrial future land use designation. We had Les Farms, or LAS Farms, and Sunflower, and these projects coming in because there is no limitation on where they can ask for the use. There's no cap of square footage, there's no location requirements, there's no limit on the types of uses included, and they're all coming out on a case-by-case basis. So staff's idea was to take that commerce concept of a lighter industrial land use designation to present it for the ag reserve. And we also did get some initial feedback as part of the workshop. Also, let's see, the part of the issue too is that IL and IG are almost identical. It says light industrial and general industrial, but when you look at the use matrix in the code, and Travis talked about this morning as well, and an unbelievable array of uses are permitted. So when we approve an industrial land use designation anywhere in the county, we're basically allowing a site to come in with a building permit for something like a contractor storage yard without any DRO approval or Class A conditional use. The idea is that we would get some, if we create this new land use and add it to the ag reserve, we could get more of a review on a case-by-case basis when it comes through by tightening up the uses and approval processes in the code. So here's some of the amendments that have come forward over the past several years for industrial. The first was Homerich. Staff, more than often than not, and I believe on all of them, has recommended denial because of that 1999 board direction. So far we've adopted 28 acres or so, and almost 300 acres have been proposed in all of the projects. So what we're proposing today is to solicit feedback from the board and then to convert that feedback into policies in the plan. So staff is proposing some concepts, and then based upon board direction, we would refine that language between today and adoption and turn them into policies. What this slide shows is the policies we've already presented. The first one is limiting the uses to light industrial only. The second is regarding preserve area. Staff is recommending the same preserve requirement as commercial and residential, which is 60% rather, for all projects over 16 acres. The board made the decision on 2016 or 2015 to have 16 acres be the non-residential for commercial threshold for when a preserve was required. We're proposing that the sites are located on arterial roadways, only State Road 7, Boynton Beach and Atlantic, and between State Road 7 and the Turnpike. And then the scale. Staff proposed a 5-acre minimum. However, we didn't propose an acreage maximum. We also didn't propose a square footage cap for the tier because we didn't have any data analysis to support that. That doesn't mean one couldn't be created. And staff didn't propose to prohibit regional sites at the Turnpike. That is another concept that could be directed by the board, is to not allow regional uses in the tier. So the options, that kind of encapsulates the packet before you today, but the options are really whether to deny or postpone or transmit. And if this amendment is denied or postponed today, there'll be no change in the status quo. We'll continue accepting and processing future land use applications for industrial, like the one you saw earlier today. And staff will likely, I can't speak for planning, but I'm in zoning now, but planning will likely recommend denial still on all of them because there's no policy guidance in the plan. We would support probably the conditions of approval like Sunflower that we worked on in Las Farmas, that no commercial uses and light industrial only and a preserve greater than 16 acres. On that commercial uses, I would like to point out, so auto repair and auto sales and truck stops and some of the commercial uses are easily obtainable in industrial future land use. That's why Las Farms and Sunflower had a policy in there that said no commercial uses, because we never want in the ag reserve or the urban suburban tier somebody to come in with, oh, I've got industrial, but they actually want an auto repair, which is we see as commercial, subject to commercial criteria. So each one of these, if denied or postponed, will become before the board individually and have the same dialogue like we had this morning. Now, if we transmit today, we have the staff recommendations that we've proposed, but we've gotten a tremendous and wonderful outpouring of feedback from the community, from COBRA, Delray Alliance, interested property owners, Sarah, and there's another group that I can't remember the name.
Bark.
That's it. It's Bark. I would have remembered a meow, but it's a bark. What happened is they brought all these ideas out after we published the Planning Commission staff report, and historically planning and zoning, planning doesn't revise the report between what we present to the Planning Commission and what we present to the board. However, we do and can take direction today, continue some dialogue with these folks on some of their ideas, and to come back with a broader or narrower, depending on your point of view, idea of what we would do with some of their ideas between now and then. And we can also ideally come up with the implementing ULDC language. So this is our suggestion. So some of the ideas that were presented that have merit is not allowing commerce on State Road 7 south of Atlantic. Maybe just look at office instead. Some say move that acreage cap for preserve from 16 acres up to 50 acres. Maybe have it subject to criteria, not just a blanket figure. Some are suggesting, you'll hear all this shortly, because they're probably going to bring up the speakers. Some of them are going to bring up, let's require direct access on these arterials, do not allow on secondary streets because of the impact on the area. And some are going to suggest probably a 3-acre minimum instead of 5. And then some may suggest no high traffic truck-to-truck style uses, such as distribution centers, and all of those ideas I think you'll hear. I haven't heard one in all of the feedback and emails and things, one idea that is fantastical. I think most of them are worthy of further discussion with staff. We just, because of the timing and because we went to the Planning Commission, and some of these ideas actually were supported by the Planning Commission. They were split on some of the ideas. So anyway, that's our idea for today. And again, because this is staff initiated, we have a lot more liberties on your direction today and us coming back versus than if we had an applicant with us. So as far as outreach, we tell the Intergovernmental Plan Amendment Review Committee, and we've also have an email list that goes out to the Ag Reserve interested parties. And like I said, we've got letters in front of you today. We have letters in the packet, lots of feedback. So staff's recommending approval. Ideally with direction, and we're more than happy to sit down between today and adoption and refine the language in any way that the board directs. There was the split, we did the split motion at the Planning Commission, the approval of the commerce in the US tier, which is the first half, the first motion, they supported 12-0. They did recommend denial of the commerce, which was a 6-6, which ends up being a denial. And there's the two motions. And if there was direction for the board, I think the county attorney's office has required direction to be separate from an actual transmit or not transmit or postpone vote. But that, I think, covers everything. Thank you.
I'm sure there's more to discuss. All right. By the way, my staff, which was watching the morning session, said we should pack a dinner for August 31st. We've pushed so much into that meeting, so word to the wise, it's going to be a long meeting. All right, we have a few cards, don't we, Commissioner Kerner?
We do, Mayor Weinroth. We have about an hour of cards on this agenda item, and we have an hour of cards and public comment on the next agenda item. That's just for your own information.
And we will be here with rapt attention, but don't feel that you have to take all 3 minutes.
And speaking of which, Brian Seymour will be the first speaker, or did you want to go third? But he's going to take more than 3 minutes, apparently.
To be fair, I'm going to try to take everybody's 3 minutes and make it less than the total. For the record, Brian Seymour Gunster on behalf of BBX Industrial. What I'd like to do is we have 5 people who are here. They can all answer questions as need be, but what I'd like to do is if I can consolidate all of that into 10 minutes or less. I will try to go quickly.
We will give you your 10 minutes, and with the idea that you'll then tell Mr. Kerner what to throw out of those cards he has.
I have told him ahead of time. That's why he
well,
knew
you gave
I
me
wanted.
2 other names, so the math doesn't add up.
I will give you all the names right now. I don't know that all the cards are there, but if they're not, they would have been. So the names of the folks we have with us are Mark Levy, who's the president of BBX Logistics Properties, Jennifer Morton, who you all obviously know, Chris Capolini with Bowler Engineering, Dr. David Menichoff, who's with FAU, which was partly Commissioner Sachs at one point suggested we engage with FAU, the broad we, not we specifically us.
Commissioner
So we took
Sachs, I
that.
see your light lit. Is there something you would like to?
No, I would just suggest that the letter that you had the professor prepare for today is excellent, and if everybody has a copy of that, then we can possibly limit his testimony. I don't know. I found the letter to be excellent.
I'm
so I'll
not going to
leave that
read
up
the
to
letter.
you
I'm
know.
not going to read the letter, but I'm going to summarize some of those points.
Is he here today?
He is here. Dr. Menichoff is here if there's questions. But the idea is not having everybody speak for 3 minutes. Try to
All right,
consolidate.
let's see how we do with this 10-minute block of time, and I think Commissioner Kerner has just taken a bunch of your cards and put them into the side here.
Thank you.
All right, let's start our 10 minutes.
So we're talking, specifically what we're talking about is the commerce use in the ag reserve. And I think we all know that we need it. It's a necessary thing there. We've had 2 days of workshops. Then it was initiated. And so we've got the data points and some of the stuff that Dr. Menichoff gave you. 4.3% vacancy rate countywide for these commerce-type buildings, and only a 1% vacancy rate within the Delray Beach area. Obviously, nothing in the ag reserve of major substance, and far below what's necessary for an equal market. And so it's not really as much about the need for the use in the ag reserve. We all know there's a need for this use, which includes the last mile distribution. And Lisa mentioned heavy traffic, some people, not her, but some people raised heavy traffic distribution type facilities. There's a difference between, and I'm going to get into this in a second, large scale distribution, like what you had proposed on the Morningstar site, and last mile distribution. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But this can't be let's bring everything in from outside. It's about trying to find a way to make it work inside the ag reserve. What's proposed is consistent with your transportation policies, specifically within the ag reserve objective. You've got objective 1.5, which talks about non-residential uses serving the needs of the residents of the tier. That's what this is. Your transportation policy 1.3D, which is about reducing per capita vehicle miles traveled and discouraging single occupancy vehicle trips. And by the allowance, and particularly when we get into the preserve issue that I'm going to talk about, by allowing the opportunity to do this as more of that campus style that Lisa had talked about, you actually meet those policies. So the uses vary based on the needs of the community. It includes the last mile distribution, contractor services where you have some office and showroom together, as well as storage, landscape services, cold storage for restaurants or grocers in the area, and for the agricultural users in the area as well, and hospitals also need some of that use. They all serve the community. That's about what's already there in the ag reserve, and that's what we're proposing to serve here. The issue is the practicality of it when you put a 16-acre cap on the use, which is really what that preserve requirement does. And this is not like a commercial use. And it's going to, what will happen is if you put it at 16 acres, you're going to make it hard to really bring all of these needs to the community. There are really limited good opportunities within the ag reserve for these. We do agree that the roads that are identified are the right roads, particularly State Road 7. State Road 7 is already a north-south supply route, so you're not adding a ton to that. There are trucks, vehicles already going up and down State Road 7 for that. You can stop, drop off, go to another thing without having to create new. So that's why we are focused on State Road 7. We don't want to create circumstances where you have a bunch of small things that don't really connect to one another. And so that's why we're looking at some larger properties and different opportunities. So while a 5-acre or 12-acre or 16-acre development can host one of the needs or two of the needs, you're going to have to jump from one to the other to make that all work. Where if you have the opportunity for more of that campus style, you have an opportunity to put things together, reduce some of those vehicle trips, allow people to do multiple things in one spot. So I want to talk for a second about the consistency with this 16 acres. And we like consistency. Everybody does. But it's not the same thing. Homes can be clustered. Homes don't need an acre. The ag reserve, you've got 1 unit per acre. But you can take 500 homes on 500 acres and put it on 40% of the land and not lose a thing. Commercial, you can take the full FAR and you can convert it and put it on 40% of the land because you can go up. So when you're looking at what's there, it doesn't really apply to what we're talking about relative to these types of uses. The 16 acres was not a magic number. There were 3 properties, if I recall correctly, that were before this commission, not all of you, but the commission at the time that 16 acres was put in place. That's why, and the biggest one was 16 acres. That's where 16 acres came from. It wasn't a magic number of how to make it all work. What we did when we looked at this, and the reason we proposed 50 acres, is because we looked at what happens at different acreages and how to make things work. So unlike commercial uses, you can't go 2 stories on these kinds of uses. You've got floor to floor differences, you've got to have the storage facility, so you can't do multi-story buildings. So in that sense, you can't take a square foot that would have been in a preserve area and move it on to what is in the development area. That's just gone. You also need additional land for these kinds of uses that you don't need for some of the commercial uses. So there are some large trucks, the 18-wheelers, that do come into this site that do have to drop off, that then store for some of that local delivery. It's not heavy truck traffic. It may be once a day or a couple times a week, that sort of thing, where trucks are coming in as opposed to in and out all day. But they've got to come in, which means you've got to have more circulation area. This is Mr. Capolini gave us all this information. And so you have to have the ability to maneuver. And you have to do it in a way that's safe and not necessarily coinciding with those box trucks or vans that go out into the neighborhoods to actually do the deliveries. And so you need more land for that. And you can't recapture that. And that's not saying we're not going to have lakes, we're not going to have buffers, we're not going to have trees, the other things that go with this. But the bottom line is, if you have a commercial use, you can do the preserve without losing your square footage. In a commerce use, for every square foot of preserve, it's a square foot of use gone. So if you have a 16-acre property, you can use all of it. If you have a 40-acre property, you can use 16 acres of it. And so you cannot gain back anything more on the lost area there. This is not the large-scale Amazon-type distribution. Talked about that. The Morningstar property is 51 acres. There's a reason they looked at that property in addition to it being by the turnpike, and as Dr. Menichoff pointed out in his letter, that you need about 50 acres when you start getting into those large-scale distribution facilities. So that's because the number of trucks that have to go there, additional circulation because there are so many large trucks in addition to still some of the workers that come in their personal vehicles. And you've also got to deal with things like security, where you actually have to have trucks be able to stack on the site to go through security that doesn't exist in the commerce where it's really serving the neighborhood. And so that's not really what we're operating for here. That's not our goal. So 50 acres is about the difference where you get from some of the regional large scale, we're over 50 acres, to the neighborhood serving last mile distribution, to the service of the hospitals that are in that neighborhood, the service for the residents, the service for those restaurants. And obviously, you've also got the opportunity for some of those smaller farmers now to have cold storage nearby so that they might have an opportunity to be able to survive a little bit. So really, that's where this comes from, and what we're asking for is about that 50 acres. And I know that Suzanne and Joe Mulvihill are here. I don't know if any other family are here, and I'm not speaking for them specifically. But they are uniquely impacted by this. There's a reason we looked at their site. We looked at their site because it's the right size to try to create something that really works and really provides a variety of needs. You can have different types of buildings, different spaces, flexibility based on the needs of the community that you can do on some of these larger sites. If you take out 60% of that site, it goes away. And so they're somewhat uniquely impacted on this. I think there's only 3 properties that aren't otherwise being looked at already. That are over 16 acres in the entire ag reserve, and they're the only one on State Road 7. And so there's an opportunity here to really create what you want and what you need. We need these uses to make it work and to make it work well. If you give us this opportunity where it's that 50-acre differential between the large-scale distribution, which would need to require preserve, and the local neighborhood distribution and the neighborhood serving commercial that comes into this commerce category, we have that opportunity. And so what we're asking for you is to transmit today with that 50-acre preserve. And of course, as always, we'd be happy to continue this discussion with Lisa if it's 45 or 48. But we ask that you transmit it with the 50 and give us a chance to make something really viable and useful happen in the ag reserve based on what we know already is necessary. And again, our team is here to answer questions, so we'll be here all day. Thanks for lunch, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Seymour? Not yet? Okay,
Not yet.
not yet. All right.
We'll be here.
Okay, very
Thank you,
good.
Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Our next three speakers will be Heidi Menafee, Lauren McClellan, Tim Linkus, and then on deck will be Sam Citron.
Good afternoon, Heidi Mahaffey on behalf.
My timer has got to get him stuff together here. You are recognized.
Thank you. Heidi Mahaffey on behalf of 1,000 Friends of Florida and Sierra Club. We oppose the future land use designation in the agricultural reserve. It is just simply not appropriate with what the principles of the ag tier have been in the founding and should be continuing. Mr. Seymour gave some insight as to what a commerce could become in the ag reserve, 18-wheelers. He's not referencing smaller operations, which is kind of what has been proposed to this commission in the past, that we just need something small, just a little bit bigger. But this is creating an opportunity for something that's going to clearly expand beyond the uses and intensities and densities that was meant to be in the ag reserve. We've got other tiers, the urban, suburban tiers, that are more appropriate for these uses, densities, and intensities. There's a couple of issues with this commerce in the ag reserve that I'll go through with you, and we laid it out in our letter to the commission as well in more detail. The ag reserve should focus on preserving the agricultural lands and fully implementing Objective 1.5, that it's not just agricultural lands, but it's also environmental, water resources, and open spaces. There's this fallacy floating around that vacant land is just waiting to be developed, but that's completely untrue. Vacant land has environmental benefits, not just to the ag reserve, but to the community as a whole. There's carbon sequestration, there's helping with flood control, and those are just a few of the benefits that could be lost if we open up these spaces to more intense uses. The proposal for requiring preserved only on parcels 50 acres and more is the complete opposite of what the ag reserve stands for. Right now, staff is requesting 16 plus acres for the preserve. But what we need to look at is that the overall framework was to preserve the open space, and in the the ag reserve was created with an overall framework that recognized preservation of open space, which was more efficient and could be better accommodating a variety of public, agricultural, equestrian, and environmental uses when consisted of large areas, large preserve areas. Exemptions reducing acreage requirements work in opposition to this concept. A commerce designation in the ag reserve is not restricted to local uses. That's something that we need to look at Objective 1.5, which requires that anything happening in the ag reserve is to service the community, the farming community, and the residents. The Commerce Flu designation as it stands would allow industrial uses west of State Road 7. As Commissioner McKinley pointed out, that is a special area that deserves special consideration. And right there now, there's nothing that would prohibit those commerces from being west of State Road 7. And in fact, at the Planning Commission, which did essentially recommend denial of initiation, states that they have, planning staff has gotten requests to expand it further past State Road 7 west.
I'm going to ask you to tie it up.
Yes, of course. So on behalf of Sierra Club and 1,000 Friends of Florida, the ag reserve is at the precipice of being built out, but just because something might not have more space for preservation does not mean that there's an expiration to the ag reserve. We need to stick to the original intention of the ag reserve tier, and that is to only allow the uses and intensities that was originally contemplated.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right, following Tim, we'll have is Lauren Malorn, and then we'll have Sam Citron.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Tim Linkus, 8289 West Point Beach Boulevard. I'm in favor of the cap being 50 acres, and I just kind of want to talk very shortly about the Mulva Hills, which I think when I met Joe in the 70s, he was still a teenager. So that puts something. But they're a legacy landowner. They bought their land before the zoning changes and so forth. But their 40-acre piece fronts 441, right next to transfer station that did not require any preserve on that. And also, if you take a look across the street, Perro Farms, the packing facility, but they're really a redistribution packing house. They bring a lot of stuff in and move it out, so it's almost the same thing. I just think that their piece would do very well for light industrial, facing 441 and all. And I believe all his neighbors around has sold the TDRs, so it's pretty much preserved around him to the east and all. And I just would like to see the cap at 50 acres. So thank you.
Very much. We appreciate your remarks. You don't look too black and blue from this morning.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lauren McClellan with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture. I just want to point out a couple comments regarding some of the language, just to bring some issues to the forefront. The first being the 5-acre minimum. There's a handful of properties that are sitting along State Road 7 that are less than 5 acres. We represent one of them. And these properties have been there for forever. And I don't know what they were before the widening of State Road 7 twice. So I just want to say that 5 acres for creating new properties, but then there's lots of lots that pre-existed. So while it might look nice on paper, as a policy and practice, it kind of disadvantages these property owners once again. So, the ones that are stuck with smaller sizes that resulted from no actions of their own. So there's that. And then I just want to point out that a consistent zoning designation with the commerce will be light industrial. And then the minimum size for light industrial property is 1 acre. So you can go anywhere from 1 to 5 acres, or you can just strike it and let the zoning code rule what the minimum size should be. And then the other issue that I want to bring up, which was new, which Lisa raised in her presentation, was somebody had suggested that you not allow commerce south of Atlantic Avenue. One of our clients, we represent an 8-acre parcel that is actually sandwiched in between the Wawa, which has a commercial low land use designation, and the Sunflower to the south, which has an industrial land use designation, and then to the west of him is the chipping and mulching guy. So he's going to be in front of you with a commerce land use designation probably here in the next 6 months or so, because that's what's around him on State Road 7. And then I would be remiss from the actions this morning to request that you consider commerce west of State Road 7 on Atlantic Avenue for the Fina family. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we'll have Sam Cintron, then Melissa McEwen, and then Mr. Steve Wallace.
Good afternoon. I'll make it short. I start out with the legal opinion letter, which regards to the comprehensive plan, which was created the Ag Reserve to tier to govern land use development in the unique farmland and wetlands. The agricultural reserve tier shall be preserved primarily for agricultural use, reflecting the unique farmlands and wetlands within it. Applications for the amendments have consistently cited a reduction in farming operation as justification for opening up these lands for development. However, this is simply a red herring. A smaller farming operations can still be viable through evolving farmland techniques, such as greenhouses growing more substantial and compact crops, such as hemp. And this leads me to the point. We talked today about plastic bags, plastic bottles, single-use plastics. And I saw this thing, hemp, and it has a lot of potential. We have, for example, a lot of our clothes are polyester, which is a petroleum-based product. Hemp is a very good alternative to, and we need to reduce our fossil fuels on a global basis. And hemp was a good product, it's always been, but Hearst, the Hearst Magnet newspaper curtailed it many years ago. In regards to the last mile the last mile distribution. I see on TV, I've seen it more than once, about all these malls going out of business because of people buying online. Can these be used as last mile distribution centers? I consistently believe we should save the ag reserve for agriculture and the environment. Florida Wildlife Corridor, although the state recently did something to curtail that to some extent. Again, citing the legal opinion letter, there is not a need, no justification for additional inclusion of industrial uses in the Ag Reserve Tour. The comprehensive plan was crafted and amended specifically to leave the option off the table. That's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Citron.
Hi, good afternoon, Melissa McEwen. I was involved in the Ag Reserve for some time now as a past property owner there. I know the hardships that a lot of long-term property owners go through out there. The recommendation from staff to create a new commerce category is one that's needed. The landscape out there has changed. I grew up out there, and it's just not the same anymore. And there's only so many uncommitted parcels, and we're looking for, the Mova Hill site is my family's, my uncle. He's a property owner that purchased before the mass zoning change, and to put in new rules and restrictions would really hurt, not only him, but other property owners. And we're looking at a category here that's needed for the community to serve all the homes and everything that are being built out in the Ag Reserve. And if we're looking between 16 and 50 acres, I think it would just be a good question to know how many parcels fit into that category. How many extra parcels are really there between the 16 and 50? And I don't know exactly, but from what I've researched, it's maybe 3. And 2 of them are looking to do the next category of the multifamily. And that leaves the Mova Hill site. And if you look at where it's at, on the east side of 441, near a transfer station, near other type of industrial uses, that's the best opportunity for this parcel. So I hope that you can look at that and support that notion that this opportunity be granted to my uncle and my family. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
All right, our next speaker will be Mr. Steve Wallace, president of Cobra, followed by Howard and/or Carol Connolly, and Jim Knight.
Thank you all, and I really appreciate the 6 out of 7 attendance at our installation. And I had the privilege of meeting with Commissioner Marino ahead of time, and again, I look forward to working with all of you this year. I just wanted to call your attention to the record. Our past president, Beth Rappaport, submitted 2 letters, and I just want to summarize those points. There was a letter that was filed before the Planning Commission meeting, which was a March 11th letter, and a March 10th letter to Ms. Amara, and then a subsequent April 18th letter, and I'll just summarize those. So ultimately, we are very sympathetic and supportive of a new classification in the Agricultural Reserve. However, there's a bunch of limitations that we want to put on them. Most notably, certainly we support, without any restriction, the Commerce Center distinction in the urban and suburban tier. Most of my comments are going to be directed at the Agricultural Reserve. First of all, we wanted to start the minimum acreage to be 10 acres, and we wanted to all of the landowners to follow the 60-40 conservation preserve requirement, and the 60% would be protected with a conservation easement. Certainly, the goal is we do not want any regional uses. We want all of these commerce centers to support the residents of the ag reserve and the surrounding areas. Additionally, any projects over 20 acres, we would ask for additional preserve based on the project and square footage on the types of businesses, to avoid the regional use. We want frontage to be on main roads such as Boynton Beach Boulevard, Atlantic Avenue, Lyons Road, 441. And we wanted to, we sent a letter and we worked with our friends at BARC, who are also our member communities, but they have set up their own coalition to address certain needs in the ag reserve. But their specific uses, and we did include a use table, and I'll just go through them really quickly. We are supportive of all of the agricultural uses in the Exhibit 2 industrial use category, other than a sugar mill or refinery. Commercial uses, we're supportive of a doggy daycare, which would support our residents, an electric vehicle charging station, which they successfully have at the Delray Marketplace, a microbrewery for all of those that still go out. I have children, so not my cup of tea anymore. A veterinary clinic, which would support the communities. Industrial uses, we would support a medical or dental laboratory, data information processing, multimedia productions to get some of these new types of businesses in our area, research and development, and then institutional and public and civil uses, we would like a daycare center, funeral home, government services, place of worship, schools, and then recreational uses, golf course, park, neighborhood infill. And if I just could have maybe 10 more seconds, I talk fast. So also, we do not want any type of distribution center or facilities. And again, all of these uses, we don't want to be by right. They would have to go in front of the applicable governmental body. Thank you all so much, and I'll be talking to you a little later on the next zoning
Thank you,
classification.
Mr. Wallace, and again, congratulations on your recent election as president of, and I wanted to ask you, is BARC, or the Boca Agricultural Reserve Communities, a subset of your organization?
Yeah, excellent question. They are not. They all are our member communities, and so certainly our interests are aligned, but they do, they have their own leadership. But again, they're our member communities. We have 114 member communities, represent over 250,000 residents in Palm Beach County, and, we're always supportive of our member communities.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
All right, Mayor, we have Howard and Carol Connolly. They have one card, but they're both here, and I'm sure they probably both want to speak. But then we'll have Jim Knight and then Linda Smith.
Okay, who's going to get the first shot?
I'll speak, and
He's gonna speak the
Carol's
whole time.
watching.
Okay.
I just approve it all.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Howard Connolly, and this is my wife, Carol. We own the property at 9819 South State Road 7. That's unincorporated Boynton Beach. We purchased this property in 1977. It was approximately a 5-acre parcel with a 3,000 square foot warehouse on it. It's located on the west side of State Road 7, just north of Boynton Beach Boulevard. In the late 90s, the Florida DOT widened the road to 4 lanes. They elected to take all of the land, 160-foot expansion, from the west side landowners. This resulted in the state buying the front 160 feet of our property. This is why today we have 3.5 acres. Our neighbors, the Humrick family, changed the land use of their property to the south and the west of us. So now we have a 3.5 agricultural island of land surrounded by light industrial property. There is also a large mulching facility to the north of us. Commissioners, I'm asking you today to consider a revision to the proposed Commerce Future Land Use language that will allow the minimum size for commerce property to be 3 acres rather than the proposed 5 acres. This would eventually allow us to request a future land use amendment that matches all the property that surrounds us today. Thank you very much for your time, your attention, and your service. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, Jim Knight, still 740
Knight.
Gavanna Drive, Boca Raton. Couple of comments. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. The landscape services, which again was brought up this morning, there's still an issue in Heritage Farms. If you require all of the landscape services that are in Heritage Farms to move out and beyond a 5-acre parcel, I believe you will find that they cannot afford it. A lot of the landscape services have not agreed to be gobbled up by the private equity firms. Top Cut was one of the companies that was acquired by the private equity firm, and as a result, they're on the front part of the Homeridge parcel, which happens to be right next to this parcel of the Connollys. I believe to set that initially at 5 acres, you're going to make it very difficult for the landscape services, for the mom and pop ones, to come out and buy 5 acres of land to try to put their landscape business on it. At the Planning Commission, there was some discussion. It was a 6-6 vote. It was not a unanimous one way or the other. And I think that this particular opportunity here in front of us is a good opportunity. It's a great discussion because it will also take the elephant out of the room here. The elephant in the room today, in my opinion, is the 1 million square foot Amazon distribution facility that was an application that was put in, press release announced, and then after they found out they had no traction, that was withdrawn. Paul O'Keen, who is the owner of that particular property, is here in the audience today. I do represent him, and he has assured me he will not be making any application for an industrial or distribution facility on his property. He wants to come up with something very special along the lines which the district commissioner, Mayor Sachs, has been talking about, something that's good for the community out there. And so you can remember this comment from Jim Knight at this meeting, that there is no interest, whether it's 50 acres, 45 acres, whatever it is on the preserve area, there's no interest in this site going as a distribution facility. Thank you for your consideration and time, and hopefully we can get a way to get the Heritage Farms people out and on to 441.
All right, we're going to be preserving that little piece of video for the future.
And I wrote it on his speaking card, Mayor, so it's in the public record. We have Linda Smith, Dagmar Braz, and then Gail Ladd.
Hello, Linda Smith, Jupiter, Florida, still. Just for information, I filled my cup at the hydration station in the lobby right here on this floor. So as discussed in 2015, that wasn't that long ago, the Board of County Commissioners considered recommendations for the addition of industrial uses above and beyond those grandfathered into the agricultural tier, and found it to be detrimental to the tier, thereby specifically directing that no new light industrial future land use designations be permitted in the Ag Reserve. Since then, the industrial uses in the Ag Reserve have expanded by, I believe, 92 acres. Introduction of a commerce flue in the Ag Reserve will secure additional expansion of a use that was not contemplated in the Ag Reserve during its inception. In order to ensure that the Ag Reserve does not evolve into a suburban and urban tier, there must be a line in the sand. There seems to be a fallacy that the tier has an expiration date, and when it is reached, the remaining land is all up for grabs to the highest bidder and the most skilled lobbyists to advocate for the change beneficial to their land use desires. The decline of farms or the decline of farming doesn't necessarily decrease the requirements to preserve such lands as open space, environmental, and water resources properties. The county should be focusing on acquisition of lands to remain preserved, converted to green open spaces, including parks with equestrian trails, wetland restoration, and additional tree canopy for natural plants to assist with water quality and buffering issues. Return the Ag Reserve to the unique farmland and wetlands composition that it has. And perhaps we really need to be considering buying the FINA properties and some of these other smaller properties. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Dagmar will be next.
Dagmar,
Hi, everyone.
good to see you.
I would just like to remind everybody in the room here, the Ag Reserve, what we're talking about was just to service the residents who live in the Ag Reserve. We were talking about the mom and pop cabinet shop and the painting company and stuff like that. You know, Mr. Seymour God bless you, darling. You deserve the big bucks you make. But he talked out of both sides of his mouth. He actually said, based on the needs of the communities. But in his same speech, he says we need enough room for the semis, the box trucks, and the vans. I mean, you can't have it both ways. I really, everybody's talking 40, 50 acre industrial park. Is that really what we need in the Ag Reserve to service the residents of the Ag Reserve? I cannot envision row upon row upon row of little industrial warehouses to service the people in the Ag Reserve, nor can I envision this huge 100,000 square foot or 150,000 square foot, whatever size building it would be, to service the residents in the Ag Reserve. I would really hope that this commission would put a limit on the size of the property for these industrial parks in the Ag Reserve. I would also hope that this commission would put on a cap for the square footage for a single user in the Ag Reserve. Please, just because this is vacant land doesn't mean we need to develop every acre. Why are we giving these people a free pass to not have to do preservation property because they want to introduce more industrial in the Ag Reserve? Please, it's the Ag Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Marino, you are recognized.
Mr. Seymour, since you've been thrown under the bus twice, is there anything you would like to clarify for us? Because I think there was some reference to 18-wheelers and
Yes.
whatnot. So please.
So, to be clear, I don't speak out of both sides of my mouth. A misunderstanding is different than that. I appreciate that I'm worth every penny I make. But what I was talking about is that you have to get the stuff there. So I was making the distinction between the large-scale distribution, which is all trucks, and then you get a couple of trucks that come in, then you store it, then you distribute it. Because you can't have last-mile distribution if it comes in from outside. So if you don't have a bunch of small trucks bring in things and have 1,000 vehicles, you have one truck, it gets stored for distribution in the area to those neighbors. So you have to get it there somehow. So that's not, in fact, I didn't specifically say there were no trucks, because I'm not gonna lie to you. You have to have some way to get the stuff there. But it's far better than having everybody come in from outside in the small vehicles and clog up the roads that way. And this way you actually have it within that community. That was the intent. Thank you.
Staff question. Beeline Highway is a SIS highway, strategic intermodal. Is State Road 7 also one of those?
I'm going to verify, but I believe it is on the strategic intermodal system.
Okay,
Yes.
so for those in the audience that don't know what that is, it's really a roadway that is used to move commerce
Thank you.
from one point to another point. Beeline Highway, you've got the Port of Palm Beach, which is at one end of the Beeline Highway, and then you have Okeechobee and Indian Town, period, at the other end, and then points northwest. And so State Road 7 is a north-south road that services all of the communities that surround it, correct? So I'm getting all this right. I want everyone to know what a SIS road is.
That was a very good description of the SIS, yes.
Okay.
And it's a priority of funding for FDOT to maintain those facilities.
Thank you.
All right. Very good. So we're going to have now Gail Ladd and then Drew Martin.
Hello, I'm Gail Ladd from Jupiter. I don't know if you know that song, Here We Go Again, Turn the Page. I just feel like I've been here before. I'm pretty much still with the Sierra Club Loxahatchee Group as my initiative, but I really feel like the Ag Reserve is being piecemealed. There's pieces here and pieces there, and so it just seems like I wish we would just restore, conserve, allow parks, preserve the green. There's really, I don't think, any need for justification to allow this now. I just really feel like you need to deny initiating this commerce and ag tier. Thank you.
All right, following Mr. Drew Martin, we will have Jeff McDougall. Did I get that right? From Oakwood Avenue, and then Dr. Lori Vinacore.
Drew Martin, I'm here on behalf of the Loxetchi Group of the Sierra Club. Just an aside, I hope the education process is going to begin soon on the single-use plastic water bottles, because you definitely have a drinking station outside, and the Sierra Club would be glad to buy reusable drinking for bottles for your staff. So we can work on that.
We appreciate the offer.
Yes. On this, the Sierra Club really has tried compromise on this, and I'd love to know when our attorney can get 10 minutes sometime. We also have an attorney here who's highly qualified, as well as Mr. Seymour is. I thought Dagmar Roz made excellent comments. I don't really think this is needed. I don't see why you would not require preserve requirements. And the reality is, this is really just an open up the door to a distribution center to operate regionally. I don't see there is a lot of demand for this. And it looks to me like you just have people that are trying to maximize the value of their properties, and they don't believe in having an agricultural reserve. But the agricultural reserve was not established per se for them, who they can sell if they're unhappy with being in the agricultural reserve. And, we accept the right of those property owners to sell their property to someone else who can and wants to be in an agricultural reserve. But the point is, and our attorney, I think, did a very good job of expressing this both verbally and in letter, is that the purpose of this is to preserve the agricultural reserve. Now, we compromised on the Puro packing plant. We spoke in favor of that because it was to preserve agriculture, and it was to support the farmers and the landowners in that area who wanted to continue to farm, and they said they needed a packing plant to stay in business, and it was important to them to have that. And we agreed, and we compromised and said, yes, if it supports agriculture, it supports the local uses, we support it. But we don't want to see this opened up. This will open the door to too much, too quickly. What we're asking you to do is to stick with the existing setup that you have now, and we hope you'll continue to deny these sorts of uses that are not applicable in the Ag Reserve. We are looking at climate change. We're looking at risks down the road. We need land to absorb floodwaters. We need to protect nature, and we need to absorb carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Very good. My apologies, Mayor. Jeff McDougall does not want to speak, but once his comments read, I support the Mulva Hill development potential. Please support the 50-acre or more preserve requirements. I don't think less than 50 acres should be subject to strict preserve set-asides for commerce centers. So we're now on to
Dr. Vinacore.
Dr. Vinacore.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. I'm Lori Vinacore, used to be Executive Vice President, President of the Alliance of Delray Residential Associations. I live at 10626 Lorena Road in the Agricultural Reserve. I'm also a farmer, and I sent a letter from the Alliance to all of you, and you've seen this. And this was as a matter of fact, Lisa Marad said her first suggestion that she gave from the community was the fact of south of Atlantic Avenue. It looks almost like Lyons Road, all residential. And there are so many residential communities there, and there are really only 3 sites, 1 8 acres, 6 acres, and 15 acres. And for complete disclosure, I live in Tierra del Rey, which is actually right in front of the 6-acre piece and the 15-acre piece. Now, Tierra del Rey has been approached by a developer to place a distribution center there with refrigerated materials and all. It's we feel that that just doesn't belong in the middle of all of this residential. But not to say that we're against anything being built there, but just when we're talking about large trucks, refrigeration, which is very loud, we have neighbors that are really affected by the creamery there on Atlantic Avenue. They can hear the refrigeration units. It's sort of something that doesn't go with a residential development. Further, the front entrance is also shared by one of the pieces here. So it looks more like something like this south of south of Atlantic Avenue should be looked at site-specifically. And you know, sitting here, listening to many people speaking, there are so many singular issues, like a 3.5-acre piece, an 8-acre piece, a 40-acre piece. It does seem that maybe we should take some time for each of the proposed projects and think about each one, take more time for that, rather than trying to put it all in one corridor. And I know State Road 7 is an evacuation route, and that's wonderful. Now, the two areas that they've spoken about, the Homrich and the Sunflower, there were good reasons to make them within, one became the industrial and the other has an overlay over it. There were good reasons for that to be that way. And if we could think of more toward, there's not that many pieces left, as one of the speakers said, look at what we have left and what we can do with those things. But definitely south of Atlantic Avenue, you could see it's a residential corridor. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. This for Lisa. Could you, if I just want to clarify what Dr. Vinacore brought up. This is a land use change, so the proposal would require a zoning change as well that would have to come back through?
This is a text amendment, so all the projects will have to come through just like today's agenda, and also twice before you. Each project, just like the items we had today for Brentwood or you know, everybody does come through independently, and also, again, through the Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, and then this board as acting as, you know, the head of the zoning as well. So there's like, everybody comes in independently. This is not changing anybody's land use, it's kind of narrowing the scope of the requests.
Right, got it. So just based on what Dr. Vinacore just stated, so every project would have an individual look being made at them, and it doesn't grant carte blanche to anybody. Thank you.
Commissioner Marino?
Thank you. Just one correction. Dr. Vinacore, you came and we all received this, thank you. But you have here application process for 1,250 homes. I don't believe that there is an application in process, so this is actually not correct. But yes, you can address that.
Yeah, sorry. You know, application in process. I got that wording from a staff report somewhere. I will find it. I will find there's an application in process. It said in some, correct, Lisa Amara?
That's the Hyder, the GL Hyder
Yes.
properties in that
Yes.
scribble chart.
Is there an application in process for 1,250 homes?
There's the future land use amendment and text amendment that was initiated, and that will be before the board on the August 31st.
But that's different than an application for 1,250 homes.
Well, it's the future land use and the text amendment, and there is the zoning applications are actually also in process. But they need action to continue on the August 31st date. That's the date, right?
The application is for 1,000 homes and 250 workforce housing units.
My heavens. Okay, thank you.
1,250 homes.
Thank you.
I'm ordering dinner now.
Seriously, we just said that.
Okay, Commissioner McKinley.
You know, once the legislative affairs staffer, always the legislative affairs staffer. The strategic intermodal system for the state of Florida and Palm Beach County is I-95, the Turnpike, the Beeline, US 27, State Road 80, Palm Beach International Airport, and the Port of Palm Beach. No State Road 7.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was verifying that through the FDOT site, and you are correct.
Thank you, Todd Bonlaren, for training me well.
All right, our next speaker will be Arlene Berry, followed by Joseph O'Donnell, followed by Sheila Calderon.
Come on down.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Well, I think that there's a number of issues with this particular amendment, a text amendment, the future land use designation change. Mr. Seymour did an excellent presentation. It was very nice. However, I think that the whole change in designation is the antithesis of the Ag Reserve. I want to remind you of the words, the objective 1.5, which guided the master plan to maintain the unique farmlands and wetlands. Reading from the document, Palm Beach County shall preserve the unique farmland and wetlands in order to preserve and enhance agricultural activity, environmental resources, as well as water resources. So the open spaces of the green agricultural tier are sustainable. They're keeping us a vital community. There's some that make the claim that farming is no longer a viable activity. It is for what I understand, it's the third source of revenue in our county after tourism and construction. In addition, there's new ways of farming. Sam Citron mentioned hemp. Hemp is an excellent thing, an excellent product. We have organic and sustainable farms like Swank Farms and Holmes Farms. There are others that do a great job of using greenhouses, bags, and hydroponics. In addition, we have permaculture, Palm Beach Permaculture Center. They use permaculture, which includes a bit of the natural wetlands on the property, so that you have the natural areas contributing to the agricultural areas. There's also biodynamics. People are using biodynamic farming in California. They're way ahead of us. And we do have a little bit of that here. It also includes natural areas. And it's very productive. So I think that could be implemented more. We do maybe need some light industrial. We can go with that, but this particular change of designation is really not appropriate to the tier. It could be moved to the suburban or the urban tier. That would be excellent in that area. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for taking the time to address us.
Following Sheila Calderon, we will have Joe Mulvihill. Did I skip somebody?
No, you have Mr. McDonald.
Sorry, Mr. O'Donnell, I apologize.
It's all right.
Hey, Joe.
Hello. We're having fun here today, right?
Of course we are.
There was an ag reserve, Joe O'Donnell, and I'm here representing Sarah. There was an ag reserve workshop held by the Board of County Commissioners on October 26, 6 months ago. The farmers, ag businesses, and legacy residents of the ag reserve were enthused about the commissioners' commitments to support agriculture. Unfortunately, there's been no follow-up. Absolutely nothing has happened to help agriculture in that 6 months. Only projects that the county staff has been been directed to work on in that period have been developer-driven, including Hyder West, the Commerce Flu we're talking about today, and the high-density housing flu. Unfortunately, due to time pressure, the Commerce Flu for the Ag Reserve and the high-density housing flu for the Ag Reserve had no input from agriculture businesses or legacy residents of the Ag Reserve. As currently written, the option of no preserve requirements for up to 50 acres and no access required along a main artery, the current language would actually allow for the 1 million square foot distribution center that Kirschner's had proposed for Atlantic Avenue. I can't imagine this is actually the intent. there is a way for the commerce flu and the high-density residential flu to be implemented in the Ag Reserve, and it can work for the agriculture interests and the existing residents. And I have some specific suggestions. First, 60/40 preserve requirements for commerce and high-density residential should be 10 acres and above. Remove the 50-acre option. And we all had the pleasure of listening to a developer explain why there should be no preserve requirements for a 50-acre development and how that would maximize his profits. That was an editorial comment. Commerce and high-density development fronting State Route 7, Boynton Beach Boulevard, and Atlantic should require access off the arterial road, not side streets. It defeats the flu's stated purpose of concentrating developments along the main arteries if commercial traffic will be disrupting residential and agricultural side streets. Third, distribution centers do not meet the definition of light industrial due to the heavy truck traffic, noise pollution, and air pollution. Either do not include distribution centers in the definition or cap them at 50,000 square feet. Update the definition of light industrial, and one more point. Building designs and standards for CMRs and high-density housing should require agriculture-themed designs. Imagine the pleasing effect of the continuity of a country-themed design at Lawn Atlantic or Boynton Beach, rather than the nondescript strip shopping currently happening. We can make this flu happen, but it takes input from the agriculture community and the residents of the Ag Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell.
Following Sheila Calderon, we'll have Joe Mulvihill, and then our final speaker, unless I missed anybody, will be Suzanne Mulvihill.
Good afternoon. Sheila Calderon from Green Acres once again here. We oppose changes to the Ag Reserve Comprehensive Plan. The proposal to expand industrial use in the Ag Reserve is not acceptable. There are many issues to be taken into consideration prior to changes to the comp plan for additional industrial and development. If we continue, we'll be losing the agricultural land as the expansion of industrial and development is not compatible, as I said, with agriculture, and one of the reasons for this land was also to do with our water conservation. We will be turning more land to concrete. And as I have said so many times before, losing the agricultural community will be forcing us to be living on imported fruits and vegetables, which we have all become very accustomed to having homegrown stuff. Also, we will be suffering economically with the loss of revenue brought in by our farming communities. Loss of the farming communities is going to happen as long as we continue constant changes to the original plan, where we had the 60/40 at this point, use of the land that gets sold. A final reminder that there was an overwhelming, vote for the 1999 bond to preserve the agricultural reserve for just that reason. Land considered environmentally sensitive and agriculturally really great land for agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mulvihill?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. My name is Joe Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road, Delray Beach, Florida. I'm pretty sure you guys know my story. I've told it a couple times, but I'm going to tell you one more time again, if you don't mind. My father started the nursery business in 1976. I started working there full-time in 1981. I've been doing this for 41 years now. I love what I do. but I'm getting old and I'm getting tired. We bought this property and we signed the contract in 91, closed in 95 before the mass zoning change, and it's a beautiful piece of property. Before we bought it, it was owned by a drug dealer. We got it from the federal marshals, but it was a dairy for, I don't know, I guess 80 to 100 years. This is a picture of me in the newspaper in December of 1997. The debate on the Ag Reserve is heating up. And it says here on Tuesday, Mulvihill nursery owner Joe Mulvihill Jr. was scrambling to find a valve for an irrigation pump. On Thursday, he's trying to find a carrier for a workman's comp. On any given day, Mulvihill finds himself contending with a host of other challenges, meeting French-Canadian label laws, communicating with Spanish-speaking help, or competing with other Florida growers. Quote, "The nursery business stinks," says Mulvihill, vice president of a 30-acre family-owned farm in West Delray. "I'm selling product for less than I did 20 years ago." But I asked Mulvihill if he would consider help keeping his land and selling off his development rights. He said no. I said no then, and I said no to a lot of different people. Even though it was so hard to stay in business, I could have used the money to do it. I didn't do it. We have a great piece of property, and fortunately, 8 months ago, I got an offer to sell it. And then we find out, I'm only going to be able to sell 16 acres of my property, and 22 acres is going to have to go into preserve. I don't really think that's right. All the land around me doesn't have any preserve on it because it was all transferred for density in other developments. And one of the reasons that was because they bought the Bowman's Dairy, 1,000 acres next to me, and everybody that was contiguous to it would be able to sell. So it was like a ripple down effect. And some people did it because they wanted to stay in business. Some people did it because they just wanted the money. I didn't do it. And I hear a lot of people talking today, and they're talking about, water retention on your property. Can I please have like 30 more seconds?
I'm going to steal it from your wife.
Okay, my sister. Sister. Anyway, when it rains at my farm, my water gets pumped off. We don't retain any water. We spray pesticides. I probably spray 500 gallons of pesticides a day. So everybody's talking about how environmentally friendly agriculture is. Well, it's not. I continue to keep farming. I'm buying my brother-in-law's 15 acres because I love what I do, but I'm getting old. I need to downsize. I was going to write a speech, but I can't because my hand is swollen. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, sister.
Suzanne Mulvihill, sister to Joe Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road in Delray. And thank you, commissioners, for your continued support in hearing from the long-term landowners in the Ag Reserve, of which you know very well that we are one of them. I wanted to share a couple things. I think staff's initiation and excitement about this commerce category shows that it's needed. It's not something that's just appearing. It is a needed category. And I've known Lisa now for 8 years. We've worked together on projects as the Delray growers, my daughter who spoke earlier, for 8 years. So that's one fact I wanted to share. And I feel that our property, being a legacy, that's a new word that's being used that I appreciate. We are a legacy landowner in the Ag Reserve. And the landowners who are legacy landowners who have come before us have been treated fairly. The Homriches, the Aldermans, my daughter, Delray Growers, that became a spinal hospital earlier this year. Lost Farms, Mr. and Mrs. Sewell were just given their rights. Sunflower was just given their rights. They're west of 7. Those are just a few off the top of my head. And if there's 2 more tonight, Mrs. Logan's property and Mr. and Mrs. Linkis's property that will be discussed with the multifamily. So that leaves us. And there's a few things here. We are the only property on State Road 7 that this uniquely impacts. And not only does it uniquely impact, as Brian Seymour said earlier, it suddenly uniquely impacts us. Because this law is going into effect now. Had we submitted a land use change 6 months ago, 3 months ago, this wouldn't even be a question. So we're asking for your support in being one of the legacy, long-term landowners in the Ag Reserve to be treated fairly. That has been the theme for 8 years, the thread that has thread all of us together as far as why we come here to every meeting. Last time I flew 17 hours, changed planes in Istanbul, arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning, rented a car, and I was here at 9:30. And I stood here and cried because I was still wearing the clothes on the plane. At least today, I'm not jet lagged, but I'm still emotional about this. And I've been able to help a lot of people. And the last thing I'd like to share is that this is coupled with science. We finally have something that isn't just saying, let's just help this farmer. This one is coupled with science, and we followed Commissioner Sachs's recommendation to get experts. And our buyer, we picked we took our time picking a very important buyer so that they knew they would help the local people. And the last thing I just want to say is that we'll make the bridge go away. The bridge will no longer be an issue for the neighbors. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. We are done with the cards, at least for the first act. I think we can probably dispose of the first motion pretty readily. This will be a motion to transmit on the urban-suburban tier. Can I see a motion? I have a motion by Commissioner Sachs. Commissioner Marino, did you second? Okay. All in favor? All opposed? Motion number 1 is approved 7-0. Now let's dig into motion number 2. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Sachs, you are recognized.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank my fellow commissioners for being so intent at working with all the different issues in the Ag Reserve. Well, we really inherited some complex issues. And I want to thank especially Lisa Amara and the staff for working on this. So please, Ms. Amara, if you could work with me on how I think a yes vote would be on, and this is what we're looking at. If I could, Mayor, we're going to take a vote on.
Well, I'm looking for a motion if you want to make it, or we can just discuss for a while.
I will, but I want to make sure that we all understand exactly what we're voting for, because there's been so many different issues presented to us, and very, very passionately as well. So, Ms. Amara, if we vote yes on motion 2, it would be with the understanding that we will transmit this new land designation known as Commerce at a later date, or we would transmit it today, so that at a later date, this fateful August 31st meeting, we will have an opportunity to vote on it. However, between now, May 2nd, and August 31st, staff and commissioners will have the opportunity to meet with all community associations, organizations, homeowners, farmers, developers, anybody who would like to talk to us about this designation, so that it can be changed, it can be modified, it can be expanded, or it could be denied, depending on our opportunity to listen to all the stakeholders. Is that what we would be voting for today, a yes vote on transmittal?
Well, I could speak for staff that me, and with Kevin's support, planning, that we would be more than happy to sit down. As you heard today, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of concepts that we didn't get in as deep as some of the speakers. So I can't speak for the board having another dialogue between now and the 31st, but certainly staff will work with anyone who spoke today or who didn't want to speak today. We can, planning does informational meetings for site specifics, but, we can meet and kind of take their ideas and see if we can craft that into modifications when we come back. Now, there might be some disagreements from different folks. Some asked for a 3-acre minimum and some asked for a 1-acre minimum and different things like that, but we could package it up and make a more refined product for the adoption hearing.
So in other words, this issue about the minimum acreage, and I know this is important to a lot of homeowners and farmers because it will affect how they can, the future of their land use. So that also will be something that we can work with. In other words, it'll be in a state of flux in terms of whether we vote yes today to transmit it. We'll also work on some of these issues with a specific issue of the minimum acreage and how much that they would have to use for a preserve. Because I know that is a big issue with a lot of our farmers especially. And so voting today, yes, would put that into discussion, put it in the box for discussion. Yes, sir.
Commissioner, if I could add one point, elaborating on what Lisa said, it's also not uncommon for us to make some modifications after transmittal, because when we have text amendments, we listen to the discussion both from the board and the public. So that tweaking of language between transmittal and adoption has happened in the past and can certainly happen now.
Okay, very good. Just wanted to be sure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor, for that opportunity. And would it be appropriate at this time for me to?
I will take a motion.
Thank you very much, sir. I would at this time move that motion 2 be transmitted we would move for transmittal at this time.
So the motion is to transmit the Commerce Flu text amendment for the Ag Reserve tier. Do I have a second? I'm sorry. As staff presented. That means that we're still with the 16 acres max, and we're still with the 5-acre min, right? Is that what the numbers are?
I believe, I'm sorry.
That's what's in.
That's the staff recommendation to transmit, but, it could be with direction to come back and look at different figures, or you could modify some of the figures now. The only hard numbers, I think, that are discussed today are the 16 versus 50, and then a 1 or a 3 or a 5-acre minimum. But then some of the other topics are a little more complicated with the access and frontage and caps and those. So those would be beyond I don't think that we can narrow those topics in, but certainly the acreage minimums or the preserve figures could be discussed and changed today.
All right. Is there some appetite for discussing whether it's 16 or 50? All right, I have Commissioner Kerner on. All right, wait a minute. I have a motion. The motion as presented is to transmit the text amendment for the Ag Reserve tier. That's the motion.
But do we have a second?
I'm waiting for a second.
Mayor, I withdraw my motion because I was under the understanding that the minimum requirements that were discussed today could be modified or changed during this period of time.
They can.
And if that's,
I think that is what staff is representing, but we have to start from somewhere.
well, that's where I would like to start then. If in fact these minimum, because these are very important issues for a lot of the people who live and who work in my area, that these minimum requirements be discussed, possibly changed, between the time of today and August 31st. And if that is the understanding by staff, then I would proceed with moving the proposal at this time for transmittal.
Okay. Commissioner McKinley, would you like to help clarify where we're going with this motion?
No, I am not making a motion. I just want to clarify that transmittal means you send the transmitted proposed amendment to the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, and you can't submit to them an amendment that contains no details. It would be like giving a vendor a blank check. So just to clarify that.
Okay, so just to clarify again for Commissioner Sacks, your motion, if it is seconded, would be to transmit with the 5 minimum, 16 maximum at this point in time, with the understanding that this can be further discussed with staff, but there is something that has to be in this document that we're transmitting.
Well, another option could be, those two, I think, are the most controversial 2 items. It could be transmitted without any preserve cap, or you could modify it not to have it at one at all, discuss it later at the adoption hearing, and you can remove the minimum completely. You know, there's so many different options with a text amendment. You can add a new number, you could modify the language today, or you can go with staff recommendation, or you could just remove those things and say you're going to make a decision at the
So
next
you're
meeting.
saying
with
that
the
this
direction.
motion that Commissioner Sacks is making to be silent with respect to the 5 and 16?
I think it could, or another number.
Mr. Rutter, you have any advice at this point?
Mayor, if I could, just offer a thought for the board to consider. You've heard earlier, before we took up the motion, the staff and the vow to work with interested parties, residents, others of that sort, should the board want to transmit it as prepared by staff with the clear direction to meet and take that feedback we hear back from them. We heard some of the representations today about acreages, and let us take that opportunity to dive in deeper with folks, bring that information back to you, and the board would then, retain that opportunity to make a change. But at least you have something structured to work with when we do go back to the interested parties, and have a fixed point to, for starting those discussions, but could take the feedback and share that with you when we're back for adoption.
All right. I have, our county attorney would like to help us at this point.
Right. I agree with Patrick. I think that the motion should either be with the 16 acres or the 50 acres with the direction from the board to revise those numbers if needed, based on conversations with the community.
All right, so Commissioner Sacks, I'm going to work with you on this. Are you still ready to make a motion? And if so, are you comfortable leaving the 5 and 16 in there? Do you want to change them to a different number? How do you want to proceed?
I have a question that
Okay,
may be helpful.
Commissioner Kerner, yes.
So I'm just helping to clarify this. So if I can just make some comments about what's going on here. Obviously, I think there's an appetite for this board, to execute on some of these policy initiatives. Ms. Mulvihill had mentioned a list of projects that had come through recently related to a similar, I know it's not exactly the same, but a similar type of land use, and I had voted against each one, I believe, not a huge surprise. But I'm also used to be a Democratic backbencher lawmaker in the State House, so I know when I know how to try to get along with people to affect public policy, and I think that's where I find myself today. So what I would like to do, and I'm happy to second whatever motion Commissioner Sacks brings forward, because what I want to do is cast the widest net today. I want to take this opportunity to send these amendments to the state, see what comments we get back, put everybody on this room and in this county on notice that, hey, we are contemplating and are going to vote on the broadest swath of public policy issues related to this, and that way everybody is aware of what the full potential of this amendment may be. And so while I think a lot needs to happen, and I have a lot of questions, because I'm probably going to vote against this if I don't get the questions answered to my liking. For example, Mr. O'Donnell asked me yesterday, why do you look at this issue differently in the Ag Reserve than other issues, like dwelling units, for example? And I didn't have an answer for him. I don't know enough about this, but when I hear things like you can't have preserve area for a large distribution center because you don't get to fully utilize the full use of the land under that context, that makes a little bit of sense to me, but I need some actual facts behind that before I even go down that road of taking away preserve requirements. When we talk about traffic, I don't know what these logistics centers actually deal with. I don't know enough. So what I would like to do is cast the widest net possible, make it 50, whatever it is, no preserve, and then let's curtail and work our way back and get comments from the state and let everyone comment and affect public policy in the widest context possible. So that's what I think would be most helpful. We have some time, August 31st. It's my brother's birthday, but I will be here. Don't worry. Let's work backwards. Let's try to accomplish as much as we can, but let's also be fair to everybody that is a stakeholder by putting them on a notice today what we're actually contemplating and where we can go from there. Does that sound reasonable?
Commissioner Kerner, if we follow your thoughts, then we would say minimum 3, maximum 50, and that's that widest net that we could then come back from later, would then possibly go back to 5 or come back down to 16 or some number between 16 and 50.
Yeah, it's like when you have an app and you can slide things, and then I slide them all the way out. Let's do as much work as we can, and then we'll have to justify it from there.
All right, so Commissioner Sachs, you have a potential seconder here. Will you accept that this motion will be that the minimum acreage will be 3 acres, the maximum would be 50, with the proviso that this is going to be a matter that we are going to have a lot of discussion on between now and the 31st? And
I'm sorry, Mayor, just one point of clarification. So you're correct on summarizing the 3-acre minimum. It's not a 50-acre maximum. What we're talking about there is the threshold for the preserve requirement.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so I misspoke. All right, Commissioner Sachs, are you satisfied that we have a broad net here?
I love to fish. However, I would defer right now to my colleague on the right who has something to say about it. Go right ahead.
Commissioner Bernard, you are recognized.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared for us to, since Commissioner Kerner mentioned, let's use the widest net, I'm prepared to go with the 50. And then for us to do the minimum of the 3-acre, and that would be my motion.
All right, I'm going to, Commissioner Sachs,
Yes,
do you want to allow
absolutely.
Commissioner Bernard?
What I'd like to do is I'd like to move, and thank you so much for the colleagues to my right who have a history here in the commission. I appreciate it very much. So I'd like to state it correctly, however, for the record. At this time, I would move for transmittal on the second motion, on the second item in the Ag Reserve, and knowing that the widest net for affecting public policy for us here in Palm Beach County would be a minimum of 3 acres. And the mayor says things without even talking. It's just amazing. And a maximum of 50 acres.
Right, but remember now, let's clarify. The 50
looking
is
at the stats.
is the reserve.
Correct.
The preserve.
50 acre is that threshold to then the preserve requirement
preserve
triggers.
land.
Yes.
Knowing, and then this is sort of a sidestep colloquy on the motion, knowing that this is in a state of flux, we're going to listen to the stakeholders, we're going to massage this a lot, we're going to have more conversation, and this is one way to do that, to keep it open so that public policy can be made based on the needs of the people who live and work in this area.
All
I've
right,
done it, Mr. Mayor.
We have Commissioner Sachs's motion. I think it's clear. I'm going to take a second from Commissioner Bernard. Commissioner McKinley, you're recognized.
I just want to clarify what the motion is. The motion is this would be applicable to parcels 3 acres and greater, and the preservation requirement would be anything that is only applicable to anything that is over 50 acres in size.
That is correct. Okay. Do we have any more debate on this? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. And I understand what my colleagues are attempting to do. I just want to state I will not be supporting this motion. I was willing to transmit based on the recommendations from staff earlier, but because I wouldn't support it in the future at 50 acres, I'm not going to support it today.
Okay, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Kearney, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I just want to be fair to the industry representatives and lobbyists. I think they understand my comments and as to why I'm supporting this today. But, you know, the social and actually statutory contract between landowners and the county residents in the Ag Reserve is that when you develop parcels out there, and I know we're not talking about a whole bunch of parcels, but this is still very impactful, there is a quid pro quo, and that is that you return something to the community, and that's that preserve requirement, and not just to the community, but specifically the agricultural community and open spaces. And so while entertaining the concept today, not humorously, but with a lot of skepticism that larger distribution centers or commerce centers shouldn't have to abide by that social contract, I have no idea if that's true or not in terms of the viability of those distribution centers. And ultimately, I may just at the end of this say, doesn't make any sense to me. That's probably where I'm going. But I want to give you as lobbyists and agents and representatives an opportunity to make your case. That case hasn't been made today. I didn't anticipate that it would be made today. I did learn a lot, and I appreciate the members of the community meeting with me. But you're going to have a really strong public policy reason to get me on board with not having preserve requirements. And if it's not going to be a preserve requirement on that parcel, I think you ought to be thinking about and discussing amongst your industry and lobby group and your clients what other inducement you can give to the community and to the agriculture community. If it's not on that site, what else can be done to assist the preservation of agriculture and open space in the ag reserve? That's going to be one of the defining and key issues, and I'll tell you, it's going for me to be a very high burden. We've had Commissioner Weiss already go on record saying he's an absolute no for this. For the sake of dialogue and due diligence, I'm willing to go along today, but I want to hear some answers both on why it's not viable and what you think would be a proper inducement in return if it's not going to be on site.
Thank you, Commissioner Kerner. All right, so just to rehash where we are today, there's a motion on the table that's been made by Commissioner Bernard, or did Commissioner Sachs actually make it? Commissioner Sachs made it, Commissioner Bernard seconded it. The motion is to have a minimum acreage of 3 acres and a preserve requirement for sites 50 acres or greater. But from the record, everybody will be certain to understand this ain't in cement. With that being said, we are going to have a vote, and I'll do a roll call just so we have no mistakes on this one.
Commissioner McKinley?
No.
Commissioner Marino?
Yes.
Commissioner Sachs? Yes. Commissioner Bernard?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Weiss?
No.
Mayor Weinroth?
Yes. I believe that was a 5-2. Okay, it has passed, but this certainly is on life support, shall we say. Not ready for distribution, exactly. All right, we have another hour's worth of cards that are going to come up in the next. I suggest we take a 10-minute break, and we will start again at 2:30. That we are still looking at a full audience. Obviously, you're interested in what's going on. All right, we're going to move on to item 3C3, and I'm just going to let anybody who cares know, because we've pushed so many items into August 31st, there is going to likely be a second comprehensive plan meeting either in August or early September. We're going to work that out so that we can split this agenda. We already had a very interesting item coming up that was probably going to take several hours, and we've just pushed several more items that are going to be taking some time. So rather than sleeping over, we're going to try and split this agenda up. All right, that being said, it's time for 3C3, and we're ready to hear what staff has to say.
Thank you, and good afternoon again. Commissioners, this is the Agricultural Reserve Essential Housing Future Land Use Designation. It's a county-initiated text amendment that would establish an essential housing FLU that would be available only in the Agricultural Reserve tier and would include eligibility criteria for parcels that could seek this designation and establish preserve and workforce housing percentage requirements as well. This was initiated by the board in February, but actually follows a couple of years of requests proposed to this board for either higher densities or workforce housing in the agricultural reserve tier. So just as a refresher, a quick overview of the current residential density options that are available in the Ag Reserve. The base density is 1 unit per 5 acres, but 1 unit per acre is available in some planned development options. The 80-20 PUD, the 60-40 PUD that you're probably more familiar with, and in the marketplaces. I will mention that both marketplaces in the agricultural reserve tier actually have units approved at 1 unit per acre associated with those marketplaces, and they're actually approved on the site plans for those 2 marketplaces. However, they have never been built, they are not required to be built, and they are not required to be restricted in terms of income if they are built. Other than that, there is no other higher density or multifamily opportunity in the Ag Reserve today. In undertaking this amendment, we were guided largely by the board discussion in the fall at the in the October and the November dates where the board discussed the reserve at Atlantic and also the Ag Reserve more generally, and the various concepts and topics that the board discussed at that time. And we're going to go into each of these in more detail and give you our recommendation for each of these items. So with regard to a preserve requirement, as you've heard several times today, the objective of the Ag Reserve tier is to preserve and enhance agricultural activity and environmental and water resources. The way that that has been implemented in the Ag Reserve, or what was previously known as the reserve area since 1980, is to require a preserve set aside. And so consistent with that, staff is recommending the same minimum that is applied for all planned developments or most planned developments in the Ag Reserve, which is that 60% preserve. So our recommendation to you is that any essential housing project include the same 60% preserve component. We would, though, recommend a couple of things with regard to those preserve areas. First, that community gardens be allowed in those preserve areas. For some reason, those are not allowed today. And also, we would recommend policy provisions that would prevent those preserves associated with essential housing from being transferred or exchanged with other preserves. And the reason for that is that they, as you'll see in a moment, will be generating higher density. You may be familiar with the fact that preserves associated with PUDs often get exchanged and transferred, and this would not be allowable for the essential housing preserves. At least that would be our recommendation. With regard to the density and the size of these essential housing projects, the board discussed in the fall several projects that were actually of course, outside of the Ag Reserve, but that some board members thought might be desirable models in terms of the mass and scale of those projects. And so we looked at those and also looked at other projects, recently built projects in the county that support a significant percentage of workforce housing, to have a better understanding of the types of densities that are necessary to support significant percentages of workforce. And what we saw in projects like Uptown Boca and other similar projects was that the density ranges from 22 to 25 units per acre in the residential portions of these projects, and that the project size averages just under 14 acres. So based on that information, staff is proposing that the project size for the essential housing require a minimum of 30 acres. Now, keeping in mind what we just talked about, which is the preserve requirement, that means that the development area at 40% would comprise 12 acres. So that 12 acres is consistent, generally speaking, with the 14 acre that we're seeing in the projects that the board identified as desirable. And then in terms of the density, we are proposing a density of 8 units per acre over the entire project area. You'll recall that in the agricultural reserve, density is assigned over the entire planned development and then clustered onto the development area. So using that same mechanism that has been in place since 1980 in the comprehensive plan, the 8 units per acre would result in a net density of 20 units per acre on the development portion, which is, again, in keeping more or less with the density ranges of the projects that various board members identified back in the fall. Another recommendation that staff would make is that a second unit type be required for projects that exceed 200 units. The reason for that is obviously to not have a sea of the same sort of visual unit type for the residents and for the other residents of the Ag Reserve. So in any project exceeding 200 units, a second type be introduced. And again, just as a reminder how the density works in the Ag Reserve, in an essential housing development of, let's say, 30 acres, the development portion, the 40%, would be where the units would be clustered. They would be removed from the preserve areas, which comprise the 60%, and which could be on-site, or the preserve areas could be off-site, or could be some combination of that. And the units from the preserve area would be clustered onto the development area, resulting in that 20 units per acre. In terms of locations, the board was clear in its discussions in the fall that you wanted to the extent possible, adhere to the recommendations of the master plan, which were that any higher density or multifamily be located in proximity to the marketplaces, or what would have been the economic development centers that were recommended by the master plan at the time at the 2 turnpike interchanges. Those were not, obviously have not been developed, but those were the recommendations of the master plan, and the board's interest, as discussed, was in shortening trips and increasing access to different mobility options, walking, biking, and so on, and of course transit access. So staff's recommendation, keeping that discussion in mind, is that the development portion, at least the 40% portion of any essential housing project, have frontage on Boynton Beach Boulevard or Atlantic Avenue in the segments extending from half a mile west of Lyons Road to the Turnpike. So that would pick up essentially the walkable, bikeable area as had been recommended, and the economic development centers as had been recommended in the master plan. And just to show you what that looks like here, this is Boynton Beach Boulevard, extending from the Turnpike, and the segment extends essentially halfway between Lyons Road and State Road 7. We've also highlighted here the three parcels that are currently unencumbered and do not have development approvals on them, that are large enough to meet the 30-acre threshold, obviously having the preserve areas on site. And then again, for Atlantic Avenue, the same segment, essentially from the Turnpike west to a distance essentially halfway between Lyons Road and State Road 7. In terms of the required percentage of workforce housing, as you know, the workforce housing program does not apply in the Ag Reserve. It has never applied in the Ag Reserve. In where it does apply in the urban-suburban tier, the required percentage ranges anywhere from 2.5%, depending on the option selected by the developer, up to upwards of 20%. However, in recent years, and based on past board direction, staff has been recommending to the board on any future land use amendment that is seeking to increase density that 25% of the project units that are going to be of a multifamily type be provided as workforce housing on site. And of course, any amendment seeking essential housing designation would represent a significant increase in density. So we are proposing, consistent with that past board direction, that 25% of any essential housing project at minimum be provided as workforce housing units on site. And then finally, in terms of an implementation method, as I mentioned earlier, this would be a future land use designation. We think that's an important mechanism to use for this because not only are the data and analysis required for any amendment, but there's also the public hearing process, and you are able to consider the factors in play at that particular time when a project comes forward, and the board retains its full legislative discretion to approve or deny any one of these projects based on circumstances at the time. We think as a future land use designation, it would be available, we know it would be available to use as a standalone designation for a project, or could be part of a mixed-use project with something like the commerce category or some other appropriate category. And because the details matter, we would also recommend that the rezoning that is required be concurrent with the land use change for any essential housing project. In terms of public notification, as usual, through our Intergovernmental Plan Amendment Review Committee, and distribution to our extensive agricultural reserve interested parties list. We have received some correspondence, which you should have in your report or at your seats for things that arrived recently. We have also been contacted by at least one agent and other community representatives and have offered answers to questions when those were posed with regard to this category. Staff is recommending approval. The Planning Commission also recommended approval 6-1, and so the motion would be to approve, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
6-1, it looks like they started fading away as the meeting got longer and longer.
It was a long day.
Okay. All right, Vice Mayor Weiss.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question. First off, thank you very much for your presentation. But my question is, one of the things it was at least brought to my attention, I don't know if this is accurate, can a preserve area be used for, in the same way we use like Green K for cleaning water, and then before it leaves the property or to be utilized for some other purpose?
That is not a direct answer, but we do have Brian Davis here from staff who can address.
Always ask Brian if you need to know something about the Ag Reserve.
Yes.
Which is funny because it's not the area I'm usually known for talking about until recently.
You're known for talking about lots of things.
Thank you. To date, there has not been an environmental use like that where there has been some sort of environmental purpose for like a water quality issue that's been done. There's nothing that says you can do it or nothing that says you can't do it. It's just no one's ever contemplated. We have some environmentally sensitive lands that have other water value and purposes, but it's not that kind of like a Green K facility.
So I guess to more clarify, would somebody be prohibited from utilizing the preserve for a natural water cleaning purpose?
The comp plan policy and the objective talks about environmentally sensitive lands. we haven't, it's a very interesting question. It's one that we haven't done. It's something that could certainly be carved out in the direction here. But typically, things like retention, just stormwater retention, whatever meets your basic development requirements, have not been allowed into preserve areas, because that you're then effectively saying you get a more development area, and then the functions that would normally happen in the development area get offset to preserves.
Right.
So we'd have to, like I said, you probably need to craft something like that in the proposed policy to address that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Commissioner Sachs.
Sir Bob, could you just stay up there for a minute? I think that's an excellent point, Vice Mayor Weiss, especially in light of testimony we heard today with regard to the use of pesticides on farms. And I think that this may be something that the staff, if we could look into this, as if this goes forward, to using some of the areas in preserve or water retention ponds as areas that we do in Green K to filter water that has been used for agricultural purposes. And I never thought of that before he brought it up, but I think it's an excellent suggestion that maybe we could work on as these plans go forward. Is this something that we could, certainly the staff could do, Sir Brian? I mean, is this something that we could do, or is it completely off the table? I guess I'm looking at anybody in staff to answer that.
Certainly, we can look into that. I guess the larger point, and like was mentioned, is in the past we have not allowed for specifically off-site drainage, because that felt was basically, like it was said, expanding the development area. We've always had the stormwater retention be included in the development area to not take away from potential agricultural or conservation of lands within the preserve areas. The idea of, a water filtration type of a setup, it's something that staff can look into.
I appreciate it. I think it would be, well done if we can, have, Green K is a beautiful area, and it's preserve, and it's water filtration, which is impressive to me that we're doing two things at the same time. So maybe if this is something we could look into, it would certainly use these lands to filter water while we're using them as either preserve or water retention ponds. So thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mayor.
And just to give us a frame of reference why we're here today, obviously the problem is that we have low-density development in the Ag Reserve, and we don't have enough housing for the people that are working there, whether it's the hospitals, the schools, or what other businesses are there. And people like Economic Council are saying that we're in deep trouble with this imbalance. So that's how we got to where we are today. All right. Commissioner Kerner has abandoned me, so I'm going to start with the cards. We have, as we mentioned before, another hour's worth of cards. Feel free to say it's been said already, or feel free to take less than your 3 minutes. But we're going to start with Melissa McCune. You're first on, and Susan Mulvihill, you're second. Did she take off with the baby?
Maybe we could put her, if you could ask, maybe she can come, maybe she's feeding the baby. She might be feeding the baby.
Okay, so we'll
Call her
go
later.
back to her
Thank
when
you.
she's back.
Thank
All
you.
right, so Heidi Mahaffey. Okay, so you're first.
Thank you. Suzanne Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road in Delray. I want to support the two legacy landowners, and again acknowledge this is another example of staff working with the needs of the community in the Ag Reserve on this multifamily designation. And I think there's two things that will be discussed about what Commissioner Sachs had brought up about allowing Lake a Lake to be part of a preserve area for the betterment of the community. And also the farm-to-table restaurant has been discussed as being allowed. This is Mr. and Mrs. Linkis's property that this affects, that has been owned. They're a legacy landowner. Also Mr. Linkis, Mr. Logan, which is Mrs. Logan's son, Mr. Vargas and Roby, they're all the Logan property. So that's all I needed to say is thank you, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Ms. Mulvihill. Okay, it's Heidi
Mahaffey.
Mahaffey. I'll get it right this third time.
That's fine. Thank you. Good afternoon. Heidi Mahaffey on behalf of 1,000 Friends of Florida and Sierra Club. We stand fast in the position that there is a need for affordable housing in Palm Beach County. However, it's not appropriate in the agricultural reserve. There's a distinction between affordable housing and workforce housing. And if you look at the minimum eligibility requirements for workforce housing, many of the residents and farm workers in Palm Beach County would not qualify to be able to purchase these properties with those particular prices that would be going forth. And we talked at length at the Planning Commission about what those specific numbers may be. But it goes off of the county's workforce housing program, and I quote, generally target households having 60 to 140% of the area median income, which was $80,200 in 2021. So what we're looking at is a proposal that would increase the density in the agricultural reserve greater than it's ever been contemplated in the past. And the founding principles require that we take an unwavering approach to how we are developing in the agricultural reserve. This specific idea of taking retention out of development and putting that into preserve just compounds what the development would be. And county staff has spoken eloquently about why it's never been allowed as a preserve. There can be an idea of water filtration, but it should not be, it should be in addition to the retention, not as opposed to it. Again, we don't support the workforce housing in the agricultural reserve. There's a number of reasons why. First, we talked about the retention. The major concern is the combination or the compounding of this density from 8 units per acre to 20 units per acre, and that likens the agricultural reserve to the urban and suburban tiers. And that's going to put a big tax on the community in that particular corridor in affecting associated agricultural lands or rodent mortality of wildlife in that area. Also, like I stated, workforce housing is not the same as affordable housing. Many workers will still fall short in that area median income. And the agricultural reserve is to support the residents and the farming community. The county would be better served focusing on public transportation for workers to come into the agricultural reserve rather than altering the ag reserve to accommodate incompatible residential densities. There are other options approved in the ag reserve that has not been encouraged or forced to be constructed for diverse housing units. For example, the housing report, staff report mentions many times about the multifamily units that have already been approved in the two traditional marketplaces in Delray Marketplace and Canyons Town Center. Those have not been forced to provide the diverse housing in the ag reserve. So again, the increased densities and intensities could alter the character of the ag reserve far beyond what has been contemplated, and we respectfully request that this be denied.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
All right, our next speaker will be Brett Gelsomino. Also, you have a question?
Melissa, we're going to hold you off for a couple more minutes and you get your baby settled.
So I have a question for staff. Since our last speaker brought up this question of how many housing units, multifamily housing units were contemplated in the master plan? How many were contemplated?
Let me find the exact numbers for you.
And then also to clarify, no, I don't think anybody was talking about, I think maybe my colleague just was a misnomer in conflating the retention pond with the water cleansing feature. So just to clarify, being separate.
With regard to the housing units that were contemplated in the master plan, there were about 2,500 apartments that were contemplated and an additional 3,100 or so townhomes and what were called small houses that were contemplated in the Ag Reserve
So
master plan.
there was always a higher level of density that had been in the master plan.
That had been proposed by the consultant, but the board at the time opted not to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, following Mr. Gelsomino, we'll have Jennifer Morton and Ms. McEwen. Whenever you're ready, the mayor will accommodate you, so just come up whenever you feel comfortable.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. My name is Brett Gelsomino. I was born and raised in Palm Beach County, on ag land, in fact. And growing up here and seeing the evolution of this county in my lifetime has been incredible, but especially in the last 12 to 18 months has been, I think, extraordinary, and it probably caught a lot of us by surprise. And I think much of it is extremely positive, right? We've got a lot of economic interest, a very strong economic base, and a lot of in-migration and demand for our area. But at the same time, we are a little bit of a victim of our own success in that our affordable housing for the largest swath of our residents and our middle class is being eroded. And I think it's the topic and the policy that's on the board today is very thoughtful. I think it's very courageous to have been constructed with so much back and forth and workshopping and collaboration. And it's I think, a very positive step in the right direction to address a civic need to provide and take care of those that take care of us, frankly. We're not here, as a developer, I'm not here to decimate or erode or to take away the Ag Reserve. In fact, my objective is to contribute to it and to add to it. For every acre that we develop, we will dedicate 1.5 acres to preservation. And my objective and what excites me about being a developer, a prospective developer in this area, is to help put the finishing touches on an area that, as we note, does not yet have the diversity of housing that was once contemplated. And we're talking about the remaining 1% of acreage in what I think is a very successfully implemented 30-year-old, 22,000 acre parcel with tens of thousands of acres of preservation. I think if done right, these remaining parcels could be some of the parcels that we look back at and are the most proud of. Things like integrating the development area with the preserve area, the community gardens, the farm to table, the passive parks, the walking trails, the man-made wetlands to actually create habitat, valuable habitat for not only a water quality project, but also just a place to get out and enjoy nature. We kicked around the idea of what if there was a cool little Ag Reserve museum out there that people could visit and say, wow, this used to be an ag, mecca, and then things changed, hurricanes, freezes, and tell the story about the area that people are going to live. So if there's an underlying request or a motion here, it would be to afford some flexibility in the current motion for the board to retain some discretion as to what the permissible uses are on these properties beyond just the straight residential, including things like community retail, could be a coffee shop or an organic grocer or the farm-to-table restaurant, but just to allow us to continue to work with the stakeholders and the various boards and agencies to deliver the best project.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Morton?
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Morton with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture. I represent many of the owners or contract purchasers for properties that were identified and eligible for the essential housing that is shown in the staff report. I am requesting the board's support for a couple of modifications to the essential housing language to really create some unique projects that incorporate the agricultural heritage while responding to some of the requests that the resident community members have made. Specifically, we're requesting to allow lakes, water retention, farm-to-table restaurants, and associated parking to serve those uses in the preserved parcels. This request is a direct result of collaboration with the directly impacted residential communities in the Ag Reserve. We have actually spent many months working with the community representatives, developing unique projects that incorporate the housing goals for Palm Beach County, as well as providing amenities that serve the current residents, while still staying true to that agricultural influences of the community. We are in the process of developing unique progressive plans that enhance agriculture by incorporating a true farm-to-table restaurant that purchases the produce from the active farm that is served at the restaurant. These preserved parcels can also provide educational amenities that promote agriculture or provide passive recreation that incorporates water, lakes, boardwalks, an extension of the district park. The 80/20 PUD currently allows up to 5% of the water retention to be located in the preservation parcel. So this idea of water in a preserve is not a new concept. Last night, you should have all received a letter of support for these proposed changes from BARC. BARC is made up of 9 COBRA communities that are located in the Ag Reserve. And I'm proud to say we finally have a YIMBY letter, and that stands for Yes in My Backyard. My clients and I look forward to collaborating with these communities and returning with more YIMBY letters. Thank you for considering the request from the existing residents and the development community to provide these needed amenities for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa?
Good afternoon, Melissa McEwen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Just wanted to come up here and show the support for this agenda item. I think it has a lot of approval and support that I see on the board. And I hear that there's, an idea that maybe to use some of the preserve for enhance the quality of life of people that might be living in the area, which, I think it should be considered. We have preserved a lot of open space out there. There is a lot of preserve, and possibly for these multifamily, we can make it a really special place to live. So I support this diverse housing in the area, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speakers will be Lauren McClellan, Tim Linkus, and Steve Wallace.
Good afternoon again. Lauren McClellan with J. Morton Planning and Landscape Architecture. I just love YIMBYism. It makes me so happy as a planner. So I don't need to speak for 3 minutes to tell you what you already know, that we need workforce housing in this county, period. And in the Ag Reserve, even more so, because there's so much that far behind the curve because they have not been subject to workforce housing in the past. So I think that in order to gain the necessary workforce housing in the Ag Reserve, it's important to allow flexibility. We need to allow flexibility in order to gain the critically needed housing stock. The Ag Reserve Master Plan regulations in the past had unintended consequences, which leads us to the $1 million homes that are the only thing that's out there, the only thing, single-family $1 million homes. So I think that the placement of water storage in a portion of preserve in order to start building the needed housing stock is a little to give in order to gain so much and make up for the mistakes of the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Tim Linkus, 8289 West Point Beach Boulevard. I'll be short because you all answered some of my questions. We purchased that land back in 1978. And I thank staff for working so hard and coming up with the ideas, what's happening now. I was just kind of thinking out loud also about it as if in the preserve, which you all have already discussed, if it could be used for water runoff or some type of water assistance for when they do make a community garden in that way. Also, I was wondering if in that area of a preserve, if there can be some type of a small pond, some type that bass could be put in there so the public could do a little bit of fishing and so forth and all. So you all kind of answered that, so I won't waste your time anymore. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, following Mr. Wallace, we'll have Jim Knight, Linda Smith, and then Dagmar Braz.
Hi again, everybody. Steve Wallace, president of Cobra, and in my day job, I'm a board-certified attorney. I'm a partner at Ward Damon. So a lot of these real estate issues I do come in contact with on a daily basis. Now, I just want to be crystal clear. Cobra, we are here. We're not here because we're cashing out on a land deal. We're not here because we're representing developers. We're here to work with the county to make good policy. And so you will see the letter that I sent you on May 2nd is a stark contrast from our standard policy. Generally, we have never approved over 1 dwelling unit per acre in the ag reserve. You notice that we support 8 units an acre with the following modifications. First of all, the 60-40 preserve requirement must be maintained. It must be on site. It cannot be swapped out from any other ag reserve area. Secondly, we want to have the workforce housing units be constructed on site. We listen loud and clear to the board and understand that housing affordability is a major issue in Palm Beach County. And I will, at the end, I'm going to provide some additional suggestions because, again, like you, I take my position very seriously as a policymaker, and I want to propose some additional policies to address housing affordability. We also do not want to give the ability under this zoning classification to allow the developers to buy out the workforce housing units. We take this very seriously. Also understand that the current infrastructure in place in the ag reserve was designed for 1 unit per dwelling acre. We currently, under this classification, have failing roads. We don't have in the ag reserve area the Bright Line, the Tri-Rail, significant Palm-Tran routes where a lot of folks rely on to get to their jobs. So again, if the staff and the board moves to transmit this, we want to limit it to 8 units per acre. No density bonuses whatsoever, a cap of 8 units per acre. Additionally, we do support, now I just want to be crystal clear, and you asked me the question earlier, BARC is not a subset of COBRA. They are our member communities, but again, the letter they provided to you is outside of our auspice. Now, I did have an opportunity to speak with those folks, and we support a lot of the same initiatives that they do. One thing that we would look at is we do want to utilize the preserve to maintain the history and the character of the ag reserve. In 2016, Cobra had a charrette and a retreat where we made proposals to the county commission to respect the history of the ag reserve. We proposed farm-to-table restaurants to utilize in the preserve. We proposed an agri-hood, which is very successful in Commissioner McKinley's district with the Arden project. We want to have an agri-hood to the public, and that's something that we would propose. And with that, we want to use some type of active type of preserve. Can I just have 15 more seconds? Thank you.
Okay.
I don't speak that much, Dagmar, but thank you. So we would support a farm-to-table restaurant in the preserve. We would support some type of community vegetable gardens, which we thank you as staff is already in the preserve requirements. We would support some type of seating or pavilion to provide an appreciation of the ag reserve. Anything, again, to promote agricultural tourism or the agri-hood concept. Again, we are here to provide solutions, not to provide opposition. Alternatively, some other mechanisms where you could address the affordable housing requirement, and we can look to the south, Broward County, Miami-Dade County, the city of Coral Springs. One thing you also could do is you could partner up and set up an RFP with developers on county land, and you could set up some type of affordable housing trust where you could really take the cost of the land out of the equation and also address the affordable housing and workforce housing concept.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace.
Thank
we
you
do
all.
appreciate, and I was just going to tell you, when we have more residents out there, I think the idea of public transportation will follow.
Thank you all.
You need more density to justify running those buses out there, but I think that will follow.
Yeah, just in closing, again, the infrastructure should be there before you build more units. That's all we ask, Mr. Mayor. Thank
Understood.
you.
Thank you.
Mayor, Vice
Again?
Mayor, Commissioners.
Really?
I know, I'll keep it short. I apologize. I've been a bad rap up here, I'm sure. there's a great opportunity to really do something special in the preserve areas. If you drive down the Turnpike, you'll see one of the preserve areas by GL Homes, which is just a walled-in big piece of property that does nothing. You have an opportunity here to take the preserve area, create some water quality features. I could see cypress trees getting planted again. There used to be cypress trees out here years ago before the farming came in and ripped them all out. You could have littoral planting, which is going to bring the wading birds. It's going to bring a lot of interesting stuff, a great, just like the Green K, something really special, because to think that on a 40 or 60 acre preserve area, there's going to be big, large farmers farming that's not going to happen. I mean, we used to have 15 large vegetable farmers. I think we're down to about 4, maybe 5 large vegetable farmers in the Ag Reserve right now. So I just think there's a great opportunity here, and 20,000 is the number that we've talked about for the workforce housing with a potential bond issue. If we can get 2,500, whatever the number is, which initially was looked at in the master plan, that would be a wonderful thing. I wholeheartedly support this. Staff did a phenomenal job, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll have Linda Smith. And Dagmar, did you want to speak? All right, and then following Ms. Smith, we'll have Gail Ladd and Malcolm Butters.
And I'm sure Linda is going to be full-throated support of this.
I'm going to digress just a little bit. So I wanted to thank you for the lunch break. So I packed my sandwich in a reusable plastic container. I wish my cookies were not packaged in plastic, but I have faith that packaging will be developed if we, the public, ask for it. Back to agricultural issues and a little bit off topic. Do you remember fireflies? If you do, you're probably as old as I am. I don't know if your kids and grandkids know what fireflies are. There are still fireflies in the Loxahatchee Preserve, but I'm not sure for how much longer. They need dark skies in order to breed, so think speed dating. It is not disputed that Palm Beach County needs more affordable housing, but a workforce housing program is simply inappropriate for the Ag Reserve as it does not support the agricultural community. The county would be better served focusing on public transit for the workers, could be smaller buses, not the big ones, rather than altering the Ag Reserve to accommodate incompatible residential densities. Multifamily units that have already been approved in 2 traditional marketplaces, specifically Delray Marketplace and the Canyons Town Center, have not been built. We need to fix that. And yes, I read quite a bit today out of the 10-page letter from Robert Hartzell. I did not reprint it on recycled paper and hand it out to everyone. I trust everyone received it electronically and will read it on their devices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Well, we know Commissioner Marino will read it on her device. All right, Gail Ladd, Malcolm Butters, and then Lori Vinacore.
Gail Ladd. I actually have a question, and I don't know if you can answer this for me. The question has to do with the traditional marketplaces. Who would have been in charge of building those and taking care of those? And why have they not been utilized? I just wondered.
We'll let you finish your comments, and then I will have staff address that specifically.
Oh, okay. My comments are pretty much the same, and it's also been shared by Heidi and Linda. I also wondered about, somebody mentioned something about parking being included in the preserve requirement, so I wasn't sure about that. Maybe I misunderstood. But I just think that the workforce housing should be in another place and not in the Ag Reserve. Thank you.
All right, so I guess the question is, how did the Delray Marketplace in Uptown happen?
Mayor, I'll take a shot at that. It's probably Lisa and I are probably the veterans of that era. At the time, the policy called for commercial only at intersections of Boynton and Lyons, Atlantic and Lyons, and there was a strict limit of 750,000 square feet. The board at the time engaged in a process, I think we casually called it a beauty contest, where they contemplated submissions from the property owners on the four corners at both intersections, chose one location at each intersection. I think the question dialed down the next level might go deeper to why hasn't the residential portions that were attributed to both of those been built. The commercial was built, both of them. I think the Delray Marketplace actually came back a couple times and did some tweaks to add square footage. I can't remember if Canyons has added square footage. Both, as Maria indicated in her report, have residential associated with them. Neither have brought them forward. Canyons, if I recall correctly, is 30, 40-ish units. Some were set aside for county usage. I think there was a site plan that was done a long time ago in Canyons, just never came forward. Delray Marketplace, I don't recall seeing a site plan. I know as staff, we have met with property owners at times on different concepts. Nothing has just ever been brought forward, and I would point out too, nothing's ever been brought forward in regard to maybe looking to add units and create an appropriate scale to possibly bring some development about.
If you'd like, I
You wanna add into
I
the
can
historical?
clarify a little bit more as to what Mr. Rutter had said. The Delray Marketplace went through a number of site plan changes before it was built, and they continually moved. They originally had multifamily above. That was split out. They went to townhomes. The townhomes were going to be in a different pod. They ultimately moved to an unbuilt pod on the northern end. It's where they have the grass parking. There was never a requirement imposed on either one to build those units. It was back at the time, I remember a former executive director and I had this conversation of why wasn't there a condition on it back at the time in that, boom. We couldn't imagine anyone would leave that number of units behind and not build them. So there was never a condition that said you must build at that point. They just simply had the allotment. They provided the preserves. When they were ultimately built, the commercial was so successful, they made a run of it and didn't need the residential to work.
Hindsight's 2020.
Of course, you can always see, yeah. As far as Canyons Town Center, there are two different pods. There is the commercial pod that GL owns, and there's the pod B, which is the county pod. We have about 50 units. They have about 35. I've had a couple of conversations with Mr. Rattery over the past year or so about that. I think they ultimately will build their 35, but it's up to the county as to when the pod B comes in for its pieces. But that's the breakdown, and neither had the condition that actually said thou shalt build.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Butters.
Yes, thank you. Malcolm Butters, Boca Raton, Florida. Is it possible also, Mr. Mayor, if Jay McCobb's with us, and he's part of our little spiel here, if we could come after us on the...
Did he fill out a card yet?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, we'll put him right behind you.
Okay, thank you. So Malcolm Butters, Boca Raton, Florida. We are 1,000% in favor of this amendment. We think essential housing is sorely needed in this county. Our goal, John Channing and I, we have the Linkus property and the Tiernan Eli property just to the east of it on the contract. It's 37 acres with the Linkus, 9 acres with the Eli property. We're in the northwest corner of Boynton Beach Boulevard and the Turnpike. Our goal was to work with the communities and to come up with a mutually satisfactory plan, and I think we did. We were actually mentioned in the YIMBY letter that you received, which is quite an accomplishment. We wanted to preserve the farming heritage. We do believe in the preserve, but the overall theme that we kept hearing from the communities we talked to was that we want to use, or they want to have the preserve used for something for a community use that benefits the community. So John and I and his sons came up with a really good plan that we're not here to talk about specifically a plan, but an overall concept where, the farm-to-table restaurant, you've heard that over and over again. We spoke to one of our other partners, Mitch Robbins, who owns Farmer's Table in Boca Raton. Mitch is a part of our group. He's wholeheartedly in favor, if that is a possibility, to put a farm-to-table restaurant there. And adjacent to it, as part of the preserve area, which is our 20-something plus acres, which we are keeping in the 40%, we wanted to create a working farm. And that's where our good friend Jay McCobb, also known as Farmer Jay, is a real farmer. He has a TV show on public television about sustainability and farming, and Jay is going to lead our farm effort. So a lot of people like to talk, but not a lot of people like John and I walk the walk. So we have a real farm-to-table restaurant who wants to go there, and we have a real farmer that wants to farm the 20 acres to provide the food for the, help provide food for the restaurant, also have community farms to have you pick them, whatever, and also provide educational sessions on farming and sustainability. And I will now defer to Jay, who might just go in a little bit about the concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butters.
Hey, thank you. I go by Farmer Jay. I actually live in the area. I live in Melrose Park in Boynton Beach. And 17 years ago, I was hired by the Breakers here in Palm Beach to start growing food organically for the chefs. They liked it so much, they sent me to Sonoma Valley in California to learn more about it and meet some new people. And I was blown away because I saw this amazing local food system. I was coming from Florida. I was a little cocky because I'm like, hey, we're in the top 10 agricultural production in the whole country, so I thought I knew a thing or two about local food. But I didn't, and come to find out, I researched it. #1 food system wasn't even California, it was Vermont. And I said, wait a minute, Vermont, how many growing days does Vermont have? They got 155 growing days. And I said, well, we're blessed with 365. How are we not #1? And I looked, and we're actually not even in the top 10. We're not even in the top 20. We're number 48 for local food. So I kind of took this personally, being a Florida native, so it set me on fire and set me on this mission. And what I'm doing now, and for the past 12 years, is I've been building gardens for people in their backyard, at schools, restaurants. Farmer's Table is one of my clients where I've built a garden, been working with them since the inception. And 12 years ago, I started a program called Farmer Jay's Junior Sprouts, where I go to schools and I educate kids on the importance and respect for growing food. And I've been, taking my little traveling circus around all over, from the library system to the schools to even the Parks and Rec department have brought me in to do classes. And I'm real excited when they called me and said, hey, we want to do this project in the Ag Preserve in my backyard, and we want to put a farm on it where you can do the things you do. And, I was told recently about, learning about, trying to make decisions and stuff, and because I always struggle, I was always like, oh, okay. But if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a no. And when they called me and asked me, it was a hell yeah. I was like, let's do this. Let's put up this farm. Let's put together an educational program for kids, and let's make it. What else enlightened me about made me excited about the project was the caliber of builders that we're working with, what they can do and how nice this is going to be. Coming from the Breakers, I had to do everything aesthetically. Everything had to be nice, and that's what I look to do. Community gardens kind of get a bad rap because it's kind of, haphazard. There's a lot of things going on. So we want to make this aesthetic. We want to make this a beautiful place that's growing food. And not only is it going to be a farm, but it's going to be organic. And not only is it going to be organic, it's going to be sustainable. And along with all that, we'll put together this educational piece, and we can bring the kids from schools to there, and they can all become certified junior farmers. That's all I got. And of course, I approve of this.
Thank you, Jay. We appreciate that. And, I'd never heard of the term agrihood until I went out to the Arden, which is a great community. I think that's certainly a model. Okay, Dr. Vinegar, right? Where are you? She left. Shame on her. All right.
All right, we'll have Drew Martin, and then Sheila Calderon, and Gabriel Bove.
Commissioner McKinley, you were recognized.
No, I just wanted to say to Farmer Jay, thank you for being here, and I'd be happy to go head-to-head with you on statistics sometime. In terms of dollar values, we are the 5th in the nation. The top 4 are in California. But more important, my son just spent 4.5 years working for a farm-to-table restaurant in Tallahassee. I'm happy to say he now wants to get an ag sciences degree, but that is exactly what they did. They had a 5-acre farm attached to the restaurant, and they grew all the produce that they could on site And their daily special menu consisted of produce that came from their farm, and everything else that they used in their restaurant was locally sourced. It is a tremendously successful restaurant and a wonderful model, and I hope that you can help us make something like that happen in Palm Beach County.
No, I thank you, and I should have, said that my statistics are dated, because this is going back almost 17 years ago when I started this. So hopefully we are taking that pole position up and getting a good spot in that, because, I think that food doesn't come from a big farm. It comes from our backyards. It comes from small farms. It comes from, right around us. So I thank you.
Thank you. It's really a cool idea.
Drew?
Drew Martin with the Lux Edge Group of the Sierra Club. I would really like Farmer Jay to get together with some of the people out there that keep telling us that they can't farm out there. So I'm a little confused, because now we have somebody standing there and saying, well, we can do all kinds of farming out there, and everybody else is standing up there and saying, I want to turn my lot into a parking lot. I want to put a BMX out here because I can't farm this land. So, what's the truth? Farmer Jay can make this land productive, then why are we giving up all this ag reserve land right now? And with all these plans, because all these plans really in the long run are undermining everything that he's talking about. And we're talking about, giving up preserve requirements. We're talking about not requiring farms. We're talking about a Hyder West, giving up all that farmland there. So, I think what he's saying is what we're saying is that, yes, you can farm this land, and yes, we should be preserving it. Now, as far as farm to table, I think that's great, but I'm not sure why, when you have all this this space already in these developments there that are already set up, why you can't put farm to table there? Why do you have to give up preserve land to build a farm to table restaurant when you already have all this available space where you could build this? So I guess what I get from this is a little bit of confusion, because it seems to me that's why you did this, these marketplaces, so you could have that, and that this was all supposed to support agriculture. So why are we coming in now and saying that we have to alter all this? Now, as far as workforce housing, workforce housing just isn't really going to meet the needs of those people that really need affordable housing. So that, the Sierra Club supports affordable housing, but, the reality is that you're not going to get the people who live out there are not going to live in that housing. What's going to happen is people are going to move into that housing who are going to work somewhere else. And so you're going to get more traffic and more congestion. We think that those places where you have the available housing should be built first before you open up to more housing. We are in favor of affordable housing, but we're really, questioning opening up the door all the time. You seem to be really just making exceptions over and over again. What we want to do is see you stick to the plan. Is your plan to promote agriculture? Then we'd like to see the commission vote to support the Ag Reserve as it is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Following Ms. Calderon, we'll have Gabriel Bove and then Joseph O'Donnell.
Good afternoon. Actually, I'm going to say that between Drew and Linda and Heidi and a few other people that spoke up here, there's not too much more that I can add, and a couple of things that I had in here that I don't want to repeat because they've already been said, and that is to do with the houses that were approved for, was it Canyonland and for the Delray Marketplace that have not happened. I am definitely, and again, as Drew said, we all recognize the need for affordable housing. We disagree with essential housing designation with a higher density of residential in the Ag Reserve, and that should not be permitted. And with that, I will say thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and Thank you.
Thank you for sticking with us today.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Gabe Bove. I'm a developer from Ponte Vedra, Florida, outside of Jacksonville. 3 years ago, we became aware of the need for housing in the Palm Beaches, and we began to look for some real estate. We came upon Atlantic Avenue. We quickly learned that the demand, as a developer, you try to identify and respond to the needs of the community. Those needs were housing, but they were also preservation. They were for affordable workforce housing. We spent some time surveying some of the shopkeepers at Marketplace, and we identified many of the needs were that they couldn't find enough employees to work in their shops. They were driving 60 minutes to come to work. So we tried to respond. We learned more about the area. We learned that there was a master plan and that there originally was planned the 3,000 multifamily units and none were developed. We also learned that there was a great deal of preservation already done, and there was only 4 or 5 properties left that had TDRs that could be developed. So with all of that, we began to assemble a team, and we began to learn more and more about the Ag Reserve. And we quickly came to staff, and we came to you as commissioners. And I applaud you for not only listening, but you took the time to learn, and most importantly, you acted. And I think today is kind of a culmination of a team effort, and we really appreciate the work, energy that's gone into where we are today. I'm here to thank you on behalf of the future residents that will live in some of the multifamily housing that we create. It'll be that teacher, it'll be that young professional, it will be that student that goes to schools in this area that learns and is motivated and moves into greater things because of you. So thank you very much for your support and listening.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting to hear that, Marketplace is looking for employees. Had they built out the residential housing that was supposed to be there, the workforce housing, I'm not saying it would have answered all their needs, but certainly would have addressed some of their needs. Mr. O'Donnell, how are you, sir?
I'm still here. I
You're
see
still
you are
here.
too, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor.
You're persistent.
Yeah.
You got 3 minutes.
I won't need that much. You'll be happy to hear. I would request that, unlike your decision to transmit the Commerce flu and not follow staff's advice of 16 acres and above requiring preserves, I would request that when you vote to transmit this flu, that you follow staff's recommendation on preserve requirements. And that's all I had to say.
And
Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell, you know from our conversation that 50 is certainly not in concrete. There'll be a lot of discussion before that comes back, whatever it does. And thank you for your comments.
All right, we'll next have John Channing, then Zach Channing, and I believe it's Miss Mulvihill.
Do we have another Mulvihill?
Or is there a Joe Mulvihill here?
Joe?
Okay, oh, it was pretty good. All right, well, you're on deck.
So, good afternoon. I'm finally able to talk. It's been a long day for everybody, I guess, but my name is John Channing. And along with my partner, Malcolm Butters, we, as Malcolm has said, we have a contract on 47 acres on Boynton Beach Boulevard from the Turnpike to Acme Dairy Road. Some of you know me, some of you don't. So the people that don't know me, I've been developing in Palm Beach County for about 40 years, originally from Miami. And about 20 years ago, we won an RFP from the MacArthur Foundation in Palm Beach Gardens with a concept of mixed use. And the city of Palm Beach Gardens did not have any rules or regulations. Nobody knew about mixed use over 20 years ago. But we met with our neighbors and we got their support. We listened to what they had to say and we designed a project. That was approved and we still own it. We still manage it. It's called PJ Commons, which is on PJ Boulevard between the Turnpike and 95. We have lots of restaurants and Apartments, and Maria Marino knows us very well. And, you know, one of the things that we did, which was interesting, we had about over 100 and some odd people come to the meeting, and they wore badges that said, "Meet me at the Commons." So we had terrific support from people in the area. So I'm here to say to you this, that, you know, you have a lot of people that come up here and, you know, talk the talk, but I think that with a partner like Malcolm and myself, we're very diverse in what we've done. And, you know, I have a very strong residential background. Malcolm has a very strong background in commerce, so we make a great combination. We have a lot of really good people to bring to the table to make this project work. And I think that's what's important for you all, that you've got two developers here that have the financial ability to make it happen. And then secondly, we have the team that can make it happen. You know, and I'm very happy that, you know, the neighbors in our area are very supportive of us. Bark, I think you have a letter from them. Cobra today came up and said they're supportive. So we've done our homework. We've worked with Commissioner Sachs quite a bit for the past 7 months. And we're very excited about this project. And, you know, to be able to develop housing and small commerce and great restaurant is something that I think the neighbors, they do want. The retention is very important to us. We need to have the retention in the preserve so it can feed our farm. So that's very important to us. And lastly, I'll finish real quick, is in order to have a second type of a product, we want to do a small townhouse type product. We need to spread out the site plan, and that's why we want to take out the retention and put it in the preserve so we have a better site plan. So thank you very much.
Good job. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zach Channing. I am along with the development group with Malcolm and my father, John. First off, I want to thank everyone who helped put the essential housing language together. I grew up right on the edge of the Ag Reserve. My parents, they still live there. And I just moved back from Florida about 2 years ago. And I was looking around to live close to my parents. And there were no apartments for me. And being 32 years old, newly married, I couldn't afford to live in one of the $1 million plus houses, which that's the only product type currently in the Ag Reserve. So, you know, I am part of the development group, but also I think it's great for young professionals like me who do want to live in the Ag Reserve, and also all the workforce housing for everyone who is working in that area. Specifically with the language for the essential housing, I'm just going to talk a little more what my father was talking about. Staff recommends 2 product types. We're okay with that. We like that. It mixes stuff up on the site plan. But the second product type, the townhouse, is a much lower density, so it makes it extremely challenging to fit all the units, where staff said that we would get around 20 units to the acre. That's not possible when you have the second unit type. So what we recommend is moving the retention into the 60%, which also I think helps the preserve area, where right now the preserve area, what do you put in there? We don't want just blank space. We want to enhance it, sort of like what Commissioner Kerner, you said you'll use the preserve area to enhance and do stuff for the community. So the retention could be a lake, it could be something beautiful, a walk-in, a bike trail, and then the other thing we want to add is the farm-to-table restaurant. And you know, in our mind, how do you support and pay for a farm? You know, something that staff wrote was community farm, which I think is a great idea, but is there enough community members to farm all the preserve area out there? So our solution is the farm-to-table restaurant, which will pay and for the working farm, which will give produce to the farm-to-table restaurant, but also Farmer Jay, all the activities that he wants to do, that will support all that. Thank you.
All right, following Joe, we'll have, that's our last card.
Oh, good. Yeah, Joe Mulvihill, 9821 Happy Hollow Road. I just like to say I've been friends with the Linkuses and the Logans. They're really good people, and I'd like to thank staff and the commission for doing a fine job with this, and I hope you support it and it passes. Thank you.
Okay. Question for staff. We've had some conversation here today about moving some of the retention into the preserve area. We've had discussion about this concept of farm to table. Tell me how that would fit in with what is before us today.
So I'll start with the second point, the farm to table, because I love the concept. I mean, it's a great idea. My concern with it being in the 60% preserve area is it's a restaurant, it's a commercial use, and it would be hard to just limit it to that one type of a commercial use, and then all of the other preserves, then if they see a use like that in this preserve, again, I like the concept, just not in the preserve area. I feel like there's the risk of ripple effects throughout the other preserves in the
How
agri.
about something like a Bednar's, a farm, not stand, but basically a farmer's market, right?
Bednar's carved themselves out of a preserve to exist. So that was a unique use that was created, but they deliberately, the area where they have the actual farm, or the store itself, it is not in a preserve. Some of the fields are in preserve, so they've sort of found a way around it. But to echo what Mr. Fisher said, there is a grave concern because there's a knock-on effect of this. And I'm a little sensitive to preserves and water uses in them. You may recall a year ago that came up. It's very specific. The policy language you have in front of you says that it cannot be directly associated with the development area. That is true for all the ag-reserve preserve languages. So this would be a significant departure. But the knock-on effect beyond that is if it's a commercial use, they're going to need access, they're going to need frontage, they're going to need signage. There's a design thing I'm sure that we're going to eventually get into it at a zoning level if we go down that. I think it's a great concept, but there are a lot of, I mean, this is a Pandora's box moment, I think, of what can happen from this and what that turns into for the other preserves, because we know what happens. One asks for it, then the next one will ask for the exception, so.
Commissioner McKinley.
Right, but if they did something along the lines of Swank Farms, it would be covered under agritourism, and it wouldn't be subject to our rules and regulations, correct?
It's something we may need to discuss, because as I've understood it, when you come in and you agree to be a preserve, you are an applicant, you agree to give up your development rights, and then every successor in a sign who then purchases that property then is under that restriction. So it's very much a legal issue, but it's clear that when you come in and you are an applicant, which they would be as a preserve, they would be bound under that restriction. They would be
Right, but
entering.
agricultural activity is allowed on preservation parcels. And so under the new agritourism legislation, then that type of agritourism use would be allowed would be considered an agricultural use. Something for the attorneys to look into and get back to us.
Ramsey, you have something you?
Well, I was just going to say, we're just actually going through some of those issues right now. The agritourism use, you have to have the existing structures. You can't build it for the agritourism use. It has to be an existing stable. You could then utilize that, but you can't build a new structure. And then you also have to deal with the off-site impacts as well, which sometimes limits what you can and can't do. So those are two big items to consider with the agritourism type activities.
So what I'm hearing you say is the concept that was just put in front of us, that Farmer Jay was talking about, that would be outside of the scope of what we're talking about today.
It's not contemplated in the staff report that's in front of you.
Right, okay.
So it would be something we need to go back and do. So I've been trying to kind of furiously kind of do some back of the napkin sort of sketch here of how does the math work out. I can't quite figure out if it does or doesn't, but it's very close. And I'm concerned that if there's a 30 acre and you've got 18 acres in preserve, you very quickly start taking this down. If you start putting in the footprint of a restaurant, the farm area, the parking, the drive aisles, all that stuff starts to very quickly eat away that acreage that they're going to need. And so I understand it's a great concept. I'm just worried that when we get to the time of zoning, which is the time you usually see me sitting in front of you, is that concrete phase of planning, it doesn't quite look the way we all thought it would. And so that's what I'm trying to sort of prepare you for if that's the path you go down.
Mr. Rudder?
Just two things, Mayor, just to emphasize on Brian's point. We will absolutely take a look at the bona fide ag nature of it and contemplate it. I think Brian's larger point, though, is when you preserve, you're accepting an additional restriction on your property beyond what you're there, dialing it down. But let us take a look and see how the two comport moving forward. The other
And he
thing
makes
is
the point, of course, of the asphalt you're going to put down for a parking lot, so that
the
becomes
accessory
another
pieces
issue.
that are needed to do that and how they may work, and there's a measure of subjectivity certainly for each one too that might present in its own way, commingled with other uses. A lot to consider if the board wanted us to direct us to consider that, which kind of be that point as well. As Mayor, you're asking these points, if you did want it to be considered, if the board did, between transmittal and adoption, to flesh those sort of things out in return, we would, be happy to do that.
I think it's worth a conversation at least. Okay, my Christmas tree is all lit up here. So let's, Commissioner McKinley, were you done?
For now.
Okay. Commissioner Marino?
Can you please remind us what the uses are on preserved land? And I know we've heard it before, but I just would like to be reminded. Thank you.
Yeah, Maria's going to go to a slide that shows those uses.
The column on the right-hand side, preserves associated with planned developments, those are the uses that are permitted. And then the two at the bottom are for the TMD and MUPD. The marketplace preserves have the additional option for those uses.
Okay, and, geez. I'm going to jump to another, whole other topic. The 50-some-odd units that are on county land, can you tell me what's going to happen with those? Are we putting them out to bid because we're not developers? If they're just sitting there, why are they just sitting there? Because this was all before my time, so please educate me.
I understand. It was part of the deal that, and we probably need to get someone from facilities here, but my general understanding is that it was part of the deal that was done. Pod B went to the county. That's now where the library and that had been the temporary use fields. It's just they're effectively banked on the site plan. I don't know that there is an official approved site plan. I know there's been a concept plan where they've been landed, but I'm not sure what the timing mechanism is to bring those forward. They're allocated to the county's use. GL only retained about 35 or so.
Mr. Rudder?
35 of the 50 or 35 in
sorry.
addition?
35 is GL's, and then there's about 53 or so that's on the county's piece.
Okay, Patrick, I'm looking to you now.
And just to keep going where Brian was, two things. One, I remember the meeting where Commissioner Coons asked for units to be set aside for county's purposes. I would tell you that the primary focus over the past few years has been the library, the dog park, and a lot of the other activities out there bringing, and some of these are just getting ready to come online out in that area. I don't know of any defined purpose yet for those, but the availability is there.
Okay. I have scribbled tons and tons of notes here, and hopefully I'll make sense. So, are we doing questions or comments?
Whatever you want.
Okay, fine. We've heard so much here today. We want it, but not here. We need it, but not here. How do we service the neighborhood if we don't allow services in the neighborhood? That's just page 1. Townhouses and apartments were foreseen, yet they haven't been built, but no one wants them built. Well, some people don't want them built, and some people do want them built. But if you can do 16 acres or 50, whatever we decide, of commerce and not have it preserve, what's to not open Pandora's box and allow it in this particular situation? So I'm just food for thought. So we heard death by 1,000 cuts, and then, and we want it we want everything planned out all at once, and then we heard, let's do site-specific. I'm just giving an overview of what I've heard today, and if anybody has heard it different, please go ahead and pipe in. You know, the policies have changed with different commissions, and as that happens, you know, our legacy owners have seen the environment around them change. Is that our fault? Is that their fault? There is no fault. It's just what happened with progress. So do we make accommodations for the legacy owners because, you know, you might have a 10-acre farm in the middle of industrial? I don't know. We're trying to figure all of that out. But I just look at all of this and say, you know, we are all trying to do the best we can up here. And I know that a lot of us, I know that we all take all of this very seriously, whether it's agriculture or whether it's residential, whether it is workforce housing. The one thing I don't see, and I know I've heard it, is I don't see the farmers knocking our doors down. I do see the developers knocking our doors down, but I don't see the farmers, other than Jay, telling us that, you know, we need more land or we can do this with the land. I know there's lots of suggestions made of what the farmers can do, but if they're having a tough time affording what they're doing now, how can they invest more money to keep their process going? So I have lots of questions, and you know, we've been putting a lot of things off now. I mean, I think we're going to actually bring our sleeping bags in August for that meeting, but we're transmitting today. Transmitting, again, does not mean set in stone, because I know we've transmitted before about 8 units per acre for workforce housing in the Ag Reserve, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm uncomfortable with 8 units per acre, sorry, not 8 acres, 8 units per acre. But again, transmittal is just continuing the conversation, and I think we do need to continue the conversation. But there's got to be a time frame of which this conversation is over, and it has to be sooner than later. And if we had thought about putting over from one of the, hold on a second, and I will conclude on this. In the master plan, the potential build out. Now the master plan, which I guess it was suggested that these were the units that should be built in the Ag Reserve. It says townhouses 4,200, apartments 2,500. Am I looking at the same thing that you all have? This one here?
We have slightly different numbers, but in the same ballpark.
Lisa, you're shaking your head, Lisa. Am I?
This is from
Okay.
the
This is
Delaware
from-
Alliance.
Right, but also this was pulled from the original master plan. So there was always a thought that there would be units in this area that would be townhouses, would be apartments. I realize affordable housing was never addressed, but I also don't think that we should be making, you know, we're trying to take traffic off the roads, and we can't do that if we have our employees working on in Martin County and St. Lucie County and commuting down to Palm Beach County. So we have to make it affordable for some people. And we have to make it affordable for everyone, not some people, sorry. But to say that we need it but not here, and we want it but not here, I think that's disingenuous. We do need it here. We are not going to solve the problem overnight, obviously, since we've been talking about this since I walked in the door, and that was a year and a half ago. So I'm happy to transmit with the others, but again.
I'm going to take that as a motion to transmit. Do I have a second? I have a second by the Vice Mayor. Okay, let's continue. Vice Mayor, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I want to thank staff. I think you all you listened to what transpired at a previous workshop, and you brought back something very much modeled after the comments that you heard, and I think you've done really a great job in putting this together. As we know, there is the opportunity to have modifications and changes between transmittal and our adoption hearing, but I think we need to get this moving. I will, to the comments that this is not going to provide, workforce housing does not help lower-income people, is not accurate, because at a 60% household income, you're talking about $48,000 a year. So a couple earning $12 an hour each could afford to have an apartment in one of these developments. So, and we're moving very quickly to a $15 an hour. So I think that it does provide a diverse range, or housing for a diverse range of incomes. And as we work through some of the other ideas, suggestions on how you sort of create these preserve areas, I think obviously number one is the fact that there is a preserve area, and that you did bring this back with a preserve requirement, which I think is one of the principles that we, and I think our community has said we require for the ag reserve area. So with that, I was happy to second your motion, and we go ahead and transmit, and we can continue to work on this.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Commissioner Sacks.
I want to thank again my colleagues on the commission for tackling these tough issues. These were started in the 1980s, and I've been studying them for a while, but the most important thing is to remind ourselves that it's to preserve agriculture and to serve the needs of the people in the ag reserve. And this is one thing that we have worked on with the two areas for development. And this has been taught to me by reading the books and by good staff educating me all the time when I bother you about these questions. And I can understand, Commissioner Marino, that it is complicated. But one thing is for sure, those are two areas, as the Delray Marketplace and the canyons. This area that we talked about today is especially important because I didn't want to cement over good soil. We've got some of the richest soil in the state right here. Why should we cement over it to build structures that would most best be served by growth, by agriculture? So we have been working on this project for a while, and the whole idea is that to have people, and this is not new, this goes on in California and other areas, to have a cooperative farm. So if you live, whether you're in workforce housing or whether it's an expensive apartment, you're living in the same area, they are non-distinguishable. You can't tell who's in workforce and who is in an expensive apartment, but you buy an aisle of crops, whether it's carrots or cucumbers. That's your aisle for your family. You crop it, you grow it, you eat it. And that's the whole idea of this area that we have two very good developers, John Channing and Malcolm Butters, working on. And the whole idea is to go back to agritourism. You live in the air, you live in the land, you live in an apartment though, you don't live in a farmhouse, but you own a little plat of land for you and your family. Now, if you're like a lot of folks, you really don't want to cook, you you don't drive, you walk over to a farm-to-table restaurant. I wish I had one close to my house. Okay? So the whole idea is to develop this area in the ag reserve as they thought of in the 1980s, which is preserve agriculture, which we will in this section, and we will also serve the needs of the people in the ag reserve. That way they don't have to drive east to get Military Trail, to get Farmer's Table. They have it right here on Boynton Beach Boulevard and the Turnpike. So I'm very pleased with this. I'm very happy very proud of my colleagues to tackle these, and I'm very happy that staff has been able to educate us all on this, because it's not that easy, but it is important. Thank you, Mayor, for the time that I've had to discuss it, and thank you to all who have talked about it. I think it's a wonderful proposal, and I'd like to work on some more of these ideas as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Leiser, you had a comment?
Yes. So I have a concern from a legal standpoint that the staff report doesn't contemplate any of these changes to the preserve areas, and that if we transmit and then end up ultimately adopting something that's completely different than what got transmitted, we could potentially find ourselves in a challenging position. I just think that the board should keep that in mind with whatever motions they're proposing, because the transmittal sends it up to the department, to Tallahassee. They review everything, and then they send back something for adoption. And if something is drastically changed between then and there, it's a potential challengeable item.
Well, the motion that is before us right now is merely to transmit the essential housing flu text amendments. Now, we've had some discussion here that have discussed about this farm-to-table potential, and I think that at the moment, nobody is including that within this motion.
Right, but there seems to be some discussion about then directing staff to come up with this farm-to-table concept and then adopting it without, okay.
No.
Okay, maybe I'm just I'm putting the cart before the horse.
I think you're a little ahead of us.
I'm a little nervous, I apologize.
Yeah, I think that certainly this conversation, I think the only thing that may be sort of on the table right now is whether there can be water in the preserve, retention. What is the number right now that's allowed, Mr. Rutter, 5%?
Correct me if I'm wrong, on a 60/40, it's none of the drainage
Correct.
needed for the development. It all has to occur in the developable area. That's
Yes.
on the different form of AGR PUD, the 80/20 version, which has only been used once or twice, that I can recall.
Yeah, everything we've had has been predicated on it's using the 60/40 PUD or traditional development concepts. That's all we're looking at, and there is, in what's proposed to be transmitted is that same language, and it's very specific. If anyone wants to follow along, it's on page E5, and it's number 3. And it says, for water management purposes not directly related to the 60/40 essential housing PUD, if approved by, and it gives it to ERM, and is managed for environmental resource values. So it's very clear, and it's like I said, it's been in your other policies for the other plan developments. It does not address, and it does not take in retention or detention from development areas. It has to be for some other purpose. So that's the language that's in your staff report and is up for
All
transmittal.
right, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just to clarify, and maybe hopefully our legal counsel to clarify, my comment was in regards to preserve area, and that was my specific question to staff, was it wasn't about water retention, but we don't allow the use of an environmental use of water in cleansing like we do. We can create an area, a wetlands, if you will, that will naturally clean water, but it was not about retention. Hopefully that clarifies.
Commissioner Marino? You're off, okay. All right, so let's just remember, we have the motion before us to transmit, which is in the text of what has been in our materials today. Nothing additional has been added, no amendments. All in favor? All opposed? Show that as a 6-0 with Commissioner Bernard off the dais. Okay, I think we have beaten that one up pretty well. It's time for comments. Mr. Leiser, how are you down there? It's nice to have you here with us.
Yeah, I'm going to be quiet now.
Try to throw that wrench in the works at the end there, huh? All right, Planning Director.
All right, I will try to keep this brief. One item I did want to add briefly. So as you know, there are a fair number of neighborhood plans within the county. We have the Pioneer Road neighborhood plan, the Acreage has one, Haverhill area. Staff has had some meetings with residents from Heritage Farms, and they want to pursue developing a neighborhood plan. So per our guidelines for neighborhood plans, they're free to create a plan, obviously. But if a plan is ultimately to be received and filed by the Board of County Commissioners, our guidelines do say that we basically get that initial direction from the board to, kick off some of the staff time working with the neighborhood, and so you all are aware that, in the future, a neighborhood plan will be coming before the board.
I'm sure Mrs. Burns will be calling us all. Okay.
So I would just basically ask for that general consensus, if there is, and I want to thank Risa McCarraher for being here today.
Very good. Commissioner Kerner, you'd like to be recognized?
Yes, in public comment, Risa McCare left a card. Please allow us to move forward with the neighborhood plan. Had to leave because of my baby. Thank you.
Very good. Zoning Director? No comment. All right. Executive Director?
No comment.
Assistant County Administrator?
Thank you for your time today, Board.
I would go for Commissioners, starting from my right. Commissioner McKinley, Commissioner Marino, Vice Mayor, Commissioner, God, I remember you.
We know each other.
Yeah, I'm
No-
not tired.
No
Commissioner
comment.
Sachs. All right. Thank you, everybody. We've had a very fruitful day, and I thank you for sticking with us. It's 10 after 4, and we're going home. We are adjourned.